Chapter 418, Pool of Destiny. Time flashed by. Soon, it was half a month later. The day was swiftly approaching in which the 5 tribes of the Crow divinity would offer sacrifices to the ancestor. To the 5 tribes, this day of sacrifices was extremely important. It was not only a day of ceremonies and rites, but also when the tribes determined their ranking in strength. The most important reason for the whole ceremony was because of the totem legacy within the Crow divinity Holy Land. This legacy was not some imaginary thing, but rather something called the Pool of Destiny. This pond was actually a deep cistern that would fill with clear waters every few years. The water was very strange. Any member of the Crow divinity tribes who entered the waters and meditated therein would experience incredible growth in totemic power. The water was not of the 5 elements. However, it would change to match the one entering it. Throughout the years, the 5 tribes of the Crow divinity had experienced many breakthroughs when tribe members benefited from the increase in their totemic power. The Pool of Destiny was the most important object to the 5 tribes of the Crow divinity, and also one of the reasons so many vassals chose to join one of the 5 tribes. However, the waters of the Pool of Destiny were not infinite. The water was limited, even from the very beginning of the rite. The first to enter would receive the greatest benefit, with diminishing returns for those after. Therefore, the so-called ancestor rite competition was used to determine the order in which various members of the 5 great tribes would enter and seize the fortune of the Pool of Destiny. Currently, the voice of the Crow Scout tribe's greatfather rang out from the top of the mountain. For 300 years, the Crow Scout tribe has always been the last to enter. During those 300 years, it was always the Crow soldier tribe who entered first. Meng Hao stood down in the square along with rank 7 Dragoneer Mo Zai and his son Mo Fang. They were joined by the Crow Scout tribe's Sky Priest and the Grand Elder. The Earth Priest had been in secluded meditation since returning to the tribe and had not yet emerged. Additionally, there were several Western Desert cultivators who, as could be seen from their clothing, were obviously not members of the Crow Scout tribe. All had incredible cultivation bases and radiated killing intent. These people were similar to Meng Hao vassals. Obviously, though, they were not Dragoneers but totem cultivators. There were several dozen members of the Crow Scout tribe also present, including Wu Chen, Wu Ling, and Wu Ali. All of them looked both nervous and excited. Wu Ling would cast frequent glances toward Meng Hao, whose expression was the same as ever as he stood there silently, with eyes closed. It seemed he didn't even notice her. The ancestor rite competition will begin soon, continued the Greatfather. According to the rules set forth by the ancestor, spilling the blood of fellow tribe members is prohibited in the Holy Land, as is killing. Therefore, as has been the custom throughout the successive ancestor rite competitions, it is you vassals who will participate in the contest and earn the chance to step foot into the Pool of Destiny. I offer my profound thanks to all of you. He looked over Meng Hao and the other vassals, and then clasped hands and bowed deeply. Next to him, the Sky Priest and the Grand Elder gave deep looks to everyone, and then also clasped hands and bowed. The rest of the Crow Scout tribe members also bowed, looks of veneration covering their faces. Mo Zai was not the first to respond, but rather Mo Fang. Fear not, Greatfather, with my father and I here, I dare not claim that we will take first place in the Dragoneer competition, but we will definitely not take last. As he spoke, he cast a grim glare in Meng Hao's direction. As for Grandmaster Mo Zai, he gave an indifferent chuckle. I, Mo, will do my best. His grating voice was filled with obvious self-confidence. Meng Hao's eyes opened. He ignored Mo Fang's provocation and looked over the other vassals, noting one man in particular, large but unimposing. His cultivation base appeared core formation, but something strange clung to him. Meng Hao sensed a mist circling him that couldn't be seen through. When Meng Hao looked at him, the man looked back. Their gazes locked for a brief moment before the man looked away. However, it was at this point that Meng Hao's eyes began to glitter. That guy has the aura of a neo-demon, he thought. It's faint, but he definitely is not emanating the power of totems. It's as if he himself is emanating a neo-demon aura. Bells and horns filled the air from Crow Divinity Holy Land at the center of the mountains. The sound rippled outward, kicking up massive winds. Everything above and below shook. Next, ripples could be seen emanating out, as if everything was being sealed. Next, a golden light shot up from the Crow Divinity Holy Land. It shot up into the heavens, spreading out and emitting massive pressure. The Crow Scout tribe Greatfather took a deep breath as he looked at the golden light. Determination filled his eyes as he said, "Let us depart." He flicked his sleeve and flew up into the air, transforming into a beam of light that shot off toward the area where the golden light was emanating from. Everyone else flew up as well. Quite a few of the other vassals had bodies festooned with totems that were now flickering and glowing. As for rank 7 Dragoneer Mosai, he flicked his sleeve, causing an enormous two-headed flood dragon to magically appear in midair. It lifted its heads up into the air and roared. Mosai stood on its back, and Mofang approached to do the same. The two-headed flood dragon was clearly incredibly powerful. The instant it appeared, it attracted the shock and astonishment of the surrounding cultivators. Quite a few people looked over at Meng Hao, curious as to what mount he would ride. Meng Hao's expression was the same as ever as he slapped a green-colored bag of holding. A beam of white light instantly shot out, which transformed into Big Harry. He seemed skinny and weak, but was over 10 meters long. As Meng Hao hopped onto his back, he lifted his head up to the sky and howled. The sound was extremely shocking as it drifted out in all directions. The surrounding Crow Scout tribe members were filled with shock. Even the two-headed flood dragon backed up a bit. Mosai gave a cold snort, patting the two-headed flood dragon, which transformed into a colorful beam as it shot off. Meng Hao sat atop Big Harry, his eyes focused on the golden glow off in the distance. He actually wasn't very interested in the Crow Divinity Holy Land, but figured that since he was here, he might as well investigate a bit. As he proceeded onward, the dozens of Crow Scout tribe members flew off from the mountaintop. Up in midair, Meng Hao could see groups of cultivators flying out from the directions of the other 4 tribes, all of them heading toward the central location. There were several hundred members of the 5 tribes in all, heading toward the golden glow at top speed. Meng Hao also caught sight of Gula, standing on top of the wild giant. His face was proud, as were the faces of the Crow soldier tribe members who surrounded him. There were also Dragoneers from the other tribe. Among the Dragoneers from the Crow fighter tribe, the most conspicuous was an old woman upon whose face could be seen dark greenish freckles. She wore a long robe and was relatively ugly. However, she was riding a gigantic cyclops ape which emanated a fiendish aura. The Crow Flame tribe had 3 Dragoneers, one of whom was a white-robed old man who had the extraordinary bearing of a transcendent being. The Neodemon he rode was an enormous white crane, elegant and beautiful. It soared through the air as if it had just descended from the world of immortals. Last was the Crow Gloom tribe. They only had 2 Dragoneers. One of them was dressed completely differently than the others. He wore a conical bamboo hat that hid his features, along with a woven rush raincoat that made him look like an old fisherman. Beneath his feet was a gigantic earthworm several dozen meters long, which was covered with a shocking, viscous liquid. As the earthworm whizzed through the air, it emitted a very peculiar smell. I doubt that Yan Song and the others are with the Dragoneers. They're most likely with the totem vassals from the various tribes. As he sized the others up, he could see that they were looking over at him and Mosai. Mosai looked over at the nearing Dragoneers and grimly said, "Grandmaster Meng, you'd better not disappoint me in the competition." With that, the two-headed flood dragon shot forward toward the golden light. Meng Hao frowned slightly and then sighed inwardly. Ever since coming to the Western Desert, he had very rarely taken the initiative in provoking others. However, as he slowly revealed more and more power, it was only natural for others to take note of him. Disputes would obviously rise up, although that was not Meng Hao's intention. "I'll have to settle this dispute sooner or later," he thought, a vicious look appearing in his eyes. Having practiced cultivation up to his current point, he very well understood the law of the jungle. When decisiveness was required, Meng Hao would not be soft-hearted. Soon, everyone was nearing the golden glow. There, a floating golden platform could be seen that looked almost like an arena. It was surrounded by swirling golden shield. Before long, all the members of the 5 great tribes arrived to float around the golden platform. The various greatfathers and priests did not exchange many words. They looked at each other coldly, and without any hint of politeness, chose to let the fighting begin. The Crow Scout tribe greatfather looked back at his vassals and said, "There are 2 rounds of fighting, each of which could be considered a battle royal. One is for totem cultivators, the other is for dragoneers. We must win both battles. During each battle royal, every tribe can send 3 people into battle. If a tribe wins in both battles, then they naturally will take first place. As for who takes second, that will be based on the performance of the vassals. There are a few who are still deciding on whether or not to attend. Throughout the history of these battles, there have been deaths, Vassals, I urge you, if you find yourself outmatched, please forfeit the match. The importance of victory or defeat cannot be overstated, however. I encourage you to work together with a sense of camaraderie. The first battle is for totem cultivators. After the Great Father finished speaking, 3 vassals emerged from the others. They clasped hands to the Great Father and then shot toward the golden light. One of the 3 was none other than the strange, unimposing man Meng Hao had noticed earlier. Meng Hao observed him as he shot forward, his eyes flickering. He circulated the immortal chi of immortal shows the way, then blinked his right eye several times in succession. This time when he looked at the man, his pupils constricted. He could now clearly see that this man was no western desert cultivator. A cloud-like mist covered his body, within which was the outlander beast which the parrot had chased after months before. Even more astonishing, he could also see traces of the meat jelly on the outlander beast. With his celestial vision technique, he could even see the aura of the parrot. As a quick recap, the infiltration party consisted of Yan Song, the alchemist from the eastern lands that Meng Hao met in Holy Snow City. There was also Mo Li and a guy surnamed Wang. It was implied that they were a gay couple. Finally was Li Tao, the one who gave them all the ability to disguise themselves and their southern domain cultivator aura. Chapter 419, Outtai. The parrot never came back after chasing the outlander beast. It's impossible to tell what happened between them. It seems they came to some agreement. He ended the celestial vision technique. He was astonished, but considering the parrot's personality, anything was possible. Meng Hao felt a bit sorry for the people from the other tribes making their way onto the platform within the golden shield. I would imagine Yan Song and the others are in that group, he thought, looking the group over. Of course, Yan Song and the others were wily old foxes who would obviously have taken precautions to prevent anyone from realizing who they were. After looking at the 12 vassals from the other tribes, even Meng Hao couldn't discern any clues. This was a battle royal with 15 totem cultivators from the 5 tribes. As they stepped into the golden shield on the platform, they did not speak. Instead, booming sounds immediately filled the air as the fighting began. Each group of 3 formed a unit, instantly become comrades in arms as they joined forces. At least, this was what happened with the other 4 tribes. However, as for the 3 people from the Crow Scout tribe, it was a different story. The man-form outlander beast stepped onto the platform, lifted his head with a roar, and then charged forward. He didn't even look at his 2 compatriots, which caused them to stare in astonishment. They had a mind to follow in the charge, but the ferocity emanating from the man-form outlander beast seemed to indicate that he intended to fight solo. The 2 immediately backed up, trembling. This development caused the cultivators from the other tribes to stare wide-eyed in surprise. In fact, many of them assumed that this was some sort of pre-planned tactic on the part of the Crow Scout tribe. However, the Great Father and priest of the Crow Scout tribe, as well as other influential members, were all clearly stunned. The tribe members from the other 4 tribes looked on thoughtfully. Rumbling filled the air, and Meng Hao's eyes glittered. However, what he was looking at was not the man-form outlander beast, but rather the vassals from the other tribes. He was still trying to figure out which ones were Yan Song and the others. Suddenly, the man-form outlander beast howled, "You bunch of immoral bastards! I represent Outtai and my 5th kid bro. I'm here to convert all of you." The sound of it was like thunder. In the blink of an eye, the man was in front of one of the 3-man units. Immediately, a boom could be heard, and magical totemic lights sprang out. These 3 men were from the Crow Flame tribe. They watched the man approach, then simultaneously attacked without hesitation. At once, an enormous boom rattled out as magical techniques collided. "Wah!" shouted the man, sounding as if he felt wronged. "1, 2, 3, damn it, there's 3 of you, 3 against 1 is immoral." Hearing this caused strange expressions to appear on the faces of the surrounding tribe members. They watched on as the big man retreated. As he did, his expression suddenly changed. Now it looked somewhat vile. "Bitches," cried the man, "it looks like you people lack screwing. Well, you wait, you just wait." He no longer looked hurt, but rather wildly pompous and arrogant. This time he headed toward a different group of 3. "I thrust. I screw. Ha ha ha, and I thrust again." The large man's voice was now piercing and even more arrogant. It was with incredible speed that he shot back and forth among the various people. He seemed to be incredibly thick-skinned. No matter how people struck him, it didn't do anything. The vassals were growing more furious. This man's attacks were completely despicable and shameless. All his divine abilities seemed to be focused on one finger. And that finger specialized in attacking rear ends. Furthermore, he didn't differentiate between tribes. He attacked anyone in his field of vision, even the two people from the Crow Scout tribe. They too were jabbed by the man, which caused them to burst forth with fury. After all, they were from the same tribe and shouldn't be attacking each other. Because of this provocation, the battle royal immediately was no longer a battle royal. Now, all of the members of the various tribes were ganging up on this one large man. Subsequently, the faces of the Crow Scout tribe members in the audience were quite unsightly. The Great Father and the priest, even the Grand Elder, all had extremely grim expressions on their faces. Throughout all the years that this ancestral right competition had been held, nothing like this had ever happened. This was no battle royal. Instead, it was a beatdown. Meng Hao gave a dry cough and looked a little bit guilty. After all, if he hadn't brought the parrot to this place, then this competition would not have turned out this way. The meat jelly can't die, the parrot's twisted vices. I'm afraid the savagery of the Outlander beast is the next thing we will see. Hey! If nothing else out of the ordinary happens, the Crow Scout tribe will most likely be the winner. Even as Meng Hao was thinking these thoughts, a roar of rage could suddenly be heard from the platform as one of the other Crow Scout tribe vassals charged in attack. He couldn't take it any longer. Having been jabbed 3 times in succession was too much of a humiliation. Roaring furiously, he charged the large man, completely ignoring the fact that they were fellow vassals from the same tribe. The other vassal next to him was about to block his way when suddenly, the large man flickered into being next to him. His finger jabbed out. Damn it, we're together, you. Infuriated, the vassal's eyes turned red and he let out a furious shout. Fine, to the death. Once again, the scene of the battle taking place inside the golden shield on the platform changed. Now, everyone was bombarding the big man. This was not even to mention the tribe members on the outside, who were also preparing to attack him. After all, his attacks were completely shameless, despicable to the extreme. In their entire lives, none of them had ever seen someone as vulgar as this. Immediately, the members of the other tribes began to ridicule the Crow Scout tribe members. This is the ancestral right competition. For the Crow Scout tribe to have recruited a vassal like that, it's intentionally causing trouble. Maybe the Crow Scout tribe couldn't find anyone else, and then this shameless fellow showed up. The faces of the Crow Scout tribe members were extremely unsightly. They wanted to offer up retorts, but there was really nothing they could say. The Great Father's eyes were filled with fury as he glared at the man up on the platform. Meng Hao sighed inwardly and felt even more guilty. However, he continued to study the members of the other tribes up on the platform, hoping to pick up on some clues as to the identities of Yan Song and the others. Suddenly, his eyes flickered as they came to rest on a vassal standing with the Crow Gloom tribe. It was a middle-aged man, tall and stalwart, his face filled with savagery. However, when the man-form Outlander beast attacked him, his face looked different from that of the others. He looked a bit hesitant, even somewhat absent-minded. The look quickly disappeared, to be replaced with fury. However, even as the fury filled his face, one of the vassals from the Crow soldier tribe suddenly shot forward in pursuit of the Outlander beast. Meng Hao's eyes narrowed. Based on this development, he could now tell who these two people were, Mo Li and eccentric Wang. The howling man-form Outlander beast was now surrounded. "Ao Tai, you wimp, it's your turn." Suddenly, a tremor ran through the man's body. It was at this exact moment that the surrounding vassals all attacked. A shocking boom echoed out. From the perspective of everyone watching, there was no way the man could possibly escape death. It was only Meng Hao that let out a sigh. He knew that the Outlander beast was coming. Within the booming sound, an astonishing roar suddenly lifted up. The intensity of the roar turned into an attack that rippled out in all directions on the platform. The sight of this attack caused the observing members of the 5 tribes to stop breathing and stare in disbelief. What they saw was all of the vassals who were attacking the large man suddenly tumbling backward, their faces filled with disbelief and shock. The man who everyone had assumed would die stood there with an expression of savagery, his eyes bright red and his hair flying about. He lifted his head to the sky and roared with the madness of a neo-demon. His body flickered, and he suddenly appeared in front of one of the other vassals, his face filled with cruelty. His hands reached out with a strange motion and grabbed a hold of the vassal, who had no chance to evade. Then he ripped. A blood-curdling scream filled the air as the cultivator's body was torn completely in half. Blood showered everywhere, and the large man flickered again. Miserable screams filled the air. The gory scene instantly caused the surrounding members of the five great tribes to feel incredible shock. They began to pant, their eyes wide. It took only a moment for three people to die. The big man was like an unmatchable celestial warrior. To approach him was the same as approaching death. "I forfeit," cried a vassal from the Crow Flame tribe as he saw the man approaching him. Trembling, his body suddenly disappeared through the golden shield as he left the battlefield. "I forfeit! I forfeit!" The shouts rang out one after another, although some people were too late and ended up getting ripped into pieces by the frenzied man. One vassal from the Crow Soldier tribe was just beginning to speak when the man-form Outlander beast appeared in front of him. The Outlander beast opened his mouth wide and directly bit down onto the vassal's neck, causing his words to instantly change into a blood-curdling shriek. It took only moments for the platform to be completely empty except for the big man. He stood there, looking around savagely and roaring. "Crow Scout tribe," he cried, "I have secured victory for you. Now give me the pool of destiny." The Crow Scout tribe members' minds were reeling. The Sky Priest was panting and the Grand Elder was staring with wide eyes. As for the Great Father, his eyes flickered and he started to laugh. "Exactly as it should be," he said. "Fellow Taoist, you have secured yourself a spot in the pool of destiny." The man gazed at the Great Father and then nodded. He took a step, and then his body flickered and he left the golden shield. When he reappeared, the surrounding tribe members all backed up and made room for him. Their hearts trembled as they avoided him. As the man neared, he seemed to almost be attempting to avoid Meng Hao's gaze. Everything was quiet for the space of about 10 breaths. Finally, a grim voice called out from the Crow Fighter tribe. "Second battle, Dragoneer duel." Meng Hao looked up. This chapter was sponsored by Surasri Prapasiri, Forest Yonk, Nam Tran and Muzaffar Akbe. Chapter 420, Break Those Fangs. What a pity, thought Meng Hao. I was only able to identify Mo Li and Old Devil Wang. There was no way to figure out who Yan Song and Li Tao are. "Grandmaster Meng," said Rank 7 Dragoneer Mo Zai coolly, "you need to be careful. This is a battle of life and death. When the time comes, hopefully you'll have enough time to say the word forfeit." He passed by Meng Hao, glaring at him with a sinister expression. Next to him was Mo Fang, who looked at Meng Hao with a look of deep fury and the clear desire to kill. As the father and son shot past him into the golden shield, Meng Hao's expression was calm. Of course, that was the nature of Meng Hao's personality. The calmer he looked, the more likely he was to kill. His opponents had bared their fangs. It was time to break them. Wu Ling looked nervous as she watched Meng Hao. Wu Chen stood next to her, his eyes filled with fanaticism. He had ultimate confidence in Meng Hao, almost to the point of blind faith. In his heart, Meng Hao's strength was incomparable. Meng Hao's body flickered as he and Big Harry turned into a white beam that shot toward the golden shield. As they entered, Meng Hao's eyes flickered. The shield was like water passing over his skin. He could very clearly feel the wood-type power within it. It seemed as if he could even utilize the power of the greenwood tree totem to exercise some simple level of control over it. At the same time, there also appeared to be metal-type power within the golden light, which caused Meng Hao no small bit of surprise. Almost at the same time that Meng Hao stepped foot onto the platform, Dragoneers from the other 4 tribes arrived in groups of 3s. Gu La, the old woman, the old fisherman, and others. All of the Dragoneers who would be participating in the battle now stood on the platform. It was at this moment that roars immediately shook heaven and earth as Gu La waved his hand, causing nearly 100 neo-demons to appear around the howling wild giant. Among the shocking group were more than 10 flood dragons as well as a gigantic zombie wolf which emanated a boundless death aura. This immediately set Gu La apart from the others in shocking fashion. The continuous roars of the wild giant caused the observing members of the 5 great tribes to be filled with shock. Next was the old woman. The giant cyclops ape she rode let out a howl as she seemed to open up a door in the air itself. Instantly, a horde of apes appeared, every single one of them a demonic cyclops. There were nearly 100 in total, the sight of which was just as shocking as that of Gu La. After her was the white-haired old man with the demeanor of a transcendent being, who rode the mighty white crane. He waved his hand and was suddenly surrounded by a vast collection of tiny white snakes. The number of snakes he possessed vastly outnumbered that of the neo-demons of the other Dragoneers. There were hundreds of them, all of whom had forked tongues that flicked in and out. The aura of a hyper-toxic venom drifted out from them. Most shocking of all, however, was the old fisherman. The enormous earthworm he stood atop of let out a noiseless roar as massive amounts of silt magically appeared around the both of them. Within the silt burrowed countless vicious-looking earthworms that swayed back and forth, making the whole scene look like an illusion. Then there was Mosai. As the roaring two-headed flood dragon circled around him, distortions appeared in the air. A neo-demon horde emerged from within, a vast collection of howling flood dragons, none of which were small. As for Meng Hao, he didn't look quite as impressive as the others. His horde only contained a few dozen greenwood wolves and bats, which was not enough to shock anyone when compared to the other 5. As of this moment, all the members of the 5 great tribes outside of the Golden Shield were paying close attention. This was especially true of the tribe greatfathers and priests. The Dragoneer duel was much different than the battle of totem cultivators. Totems represented personal strength. However, in many aspects, Dragoneers could influence the tribe as a whole. Whichever way you looked at it, Dragoneers were in a far higher position than totem cultivators. The first battle of the Ancestor Right competition could be ignored to some extent. The truly important part of the whole thing was the second battle. Wu Ling looked extremely nervous. Wu Chen looked excited and passionate. The rest of the members of the 5 great tribes exchanged anxious glances. It was at this point that the battle royal began. In the past, Meng Hao had waited for others to take initiative, but in the Western Desert, things were different. He would strike first, with intent to kill. His first attack was actually not leveled against any of the Dragoneers from the 4 other tribes, but instead toward Mosai. Bare your teeth, then you're looking to die. That was Meng Hao. If you attack, you must do so with decisiveness and killing intent. He waved his sleeve, and immediately, Big Harry howled as his body began to expand. The wolfpack next to him, as well as the black bat, all transformed into beams of light that shot toward Mosai and his neo-demon horde. Meng Hao's attack caught Mosai completely by surprise. He had never imagined that Meng Hao would be the first one to make a move, let alone against him. His plan all along had been to launch a sneak attack against Meng Hao during the thick of battle, so that he would have a good excuse in case anyone called him out on the matter. Meng Hao's attack had thus caught him completely unawares. "Are you looking to die?" he roared. Flood dragons from the horde next to him roared and shot toward Meng Hao's neo-demons. Off to the side, Mo Fang's face filled with intense rage as he glared at Meng Hao. Then a cold smile twisted his face. "You're dead," he said. Rumbling sounds immediately rose up into the sky. Meng Hao's attack filled the other Dragoneer vassals with shock. Everyone outside of the Golden Shield also watched on, eyes flickering with astonishment. What's going on with the Crow Scout tribe? They have another turncoat. Don't tell me that this guy is just like that guy from before, so powerful that he can beat everyone else. No way, Dragoneer Tianqi is too powerful and could never be defeated by that guy. The shocked members of the other tribes slowly looked over to the members of the Crow Scout tribe. What they saw was the Crow Scout tribe members in complete astonishment. This was especially true of the Great Father and the priest, whose expressions were very similar to their expressions during the first battle. This prompted further discussions. "Damn it, something's wrong here. Look at their expressions." The first time was understandable, but for the same thing to happen again means it has to be some kind of trick on their part. But what trick exactly is it to kill each other first? As the discussion continued on the outside, inside the Golden Shield, Mosai was laughing uproariously. "Meng, you twerp, since you're looking to die, don't blame me for accommodating you. We're both vassals of the same tribe, but considering how you're attacking me, you must be a double agent. In that case, I'm going to kill you even if you do try to forfeit." Mosai had sent half of his flood dragons, as well as the two-headed flood dragon, charging forward in attack. A huge boom resonated up into the sky. Big Harry was a blinding white beam of light filled with savagery. The black bat flickered forward. Its sharp teeth glinted, and the body of one of the flood dragons immediately shriveled up. It died with a miserable shriek. Mosai's face immediately fell. He had predicted that Meng Hao would be strong, but he never imagined that the white wolf and black bat would be so shocking. In fact, he almost couldn't believe that this was the same bat that used to belong to him. In his recollection, its latent talent didn't match up to the flood dragons, which was why he had eventually given it to his son to protect him. How could he ever have imagined that under Meng Hao's control, the black bat would exhibit such astonishing power? "Things are just beginning," he then said with a cold laugh. "I'd originally planned to use this next trick on an outsider, but I guess you'll do nicely." With that, he slapped his bag of holding, Immediately, hundreds of howling flood dragons emerged, 10 of whom were two-headed. When the other Dragoneers saw the aura emanating from these flood dragons, it filled their faces with shock. Of course, those on the outside of the shield were even more surprised. Meng Hao looked indifferently at the flood dragons and then said, "Wrong. Things aren't beginning, they're ending." His hand flashed an incantation gesture, and then pushed down onto his Danshan region. Immediately, his gold core trembled as a roar emanated out from the ancient flying rain dragon core. In accompaniment with the roar, the illusory image of a 300-meter-long flying rain dragon appeared above his head. It had a long tail, wings with sharp tips and blood-red eyes. Immediately, a shocking aura emanated out. Even the golden shield began to ripple and distort. The surrounding Dragoneers stared in shock. "That's a level 11 Neo-Demon. Heavens, that's the illusory spirit projection of a level 11 Neo-Demon. Such pressure, this guy, don't tell me he's a Grand Dragoneer." All of the other Dragoneers on the platform were shocked. They and their Neo-Demons were all trembling with intense fear as they looked at the flying rain dragon. The intense pressure emanated by something vastly above them suddenly filled the area. This intangible pressure covered everything within the golden shield on the platform. The instant the flying rain dragon appeared, the flood dragons around Mo Zai began to shake and emit plaintive shrieks. They seemed to be shrieks of fear bordering on phobia. They all shrank back, shaking, as if they couldn't stand up to the pressure weighing down on them. Their miserable shrieks were such that it seemed as if their bodies might begin to collapse. Meng Hao's face was cold as he waved his right hand. Immediately, the flying rain dragon let out a shocking howl which caused the golden shield to shake, and the sky outside of the shield to grow dim. The ancient flying rain dragon was a sovereign of the sky, and its pride and dignity were now on full display as it charged toward the trembling flood dragons. When it passed, there were no miserable shrieks. The flood dragons did nothing to prevent the flying rain dragon from swallowing them up. Regardless of whether they had two heads or one in front of the flying rain dragon, they were so weak that they couldn't do anything to resist. Within the space of a few breaths, they had all been completely consumed. Mo Zai cried out in alarm and disbelief. His face was pale white as he staggered backward. As the flying rain dragon neared him, his eyes filled with frenzy. His eyes radiating with manic desire to continue living, he suddenly grabbed Mo Fang and shoved him out in front. "Mo Zai, have submerged myself in the Tao of Dragoneering for many years. I have expended my heart's blood in my pursuits, in my research in how to produce shocking neo-demons. Meng, you twerp, I refuse to give in." Roaring, he performed an incantation with his left hand as the flying rain dragon neared. Then he pushed his hand down onto the head of his son Mo Fang. A look of disbelief and confusion could be seen on Mo Fang's face as blood sprayed from his mouth. Suddenly, his head exploded. "Take my son to give birth to a new neo-demon. Use my son's soul to bring forth the Mo clan's Dragoneer legacy, the 8-headed Mo flood dragon." Roaring could be heard as Mo Fang's body shook. Suddenly, the black head of a flood dragon emerged from within. It flew out into the air. 1, 2, 3. It took only a split second for 8 heads to burst out from within Mo Fang's body. P.S. The image in the sneak peek is promotional art of a flying rain dragon from the Beseech the Devil computer game. Beseech the Devil is one of Jen's other 3 major novels, so I would assume the basic appearance jives between the two. Chapter 421, THAT Fishing Line. Mo Fang's body exploded into pieces. However, his flesh and blood congealed together, forming 8 flood dragon heads. Moments later, a 300-meter-long 8-headed flood dragon appeared before Mo Zai. Mo Zai's eyes bright red, he lifted his head and howled. The flood dragon roared and sped toward the incoming flying rain dragon. "Kill them?" cried Mo Zai frenziedly. The 8-headed flood dragon differed greatly from an ordinary one, barely matching the flying rain dragon's pressure. It charged with a howl and slammed into it. Meng Hao watched coldly, his expression unchanged. The surrounding Dragoneers observed in shock. Outside the Golden Shield, members of the 5 great tribes panted. All watched intently as the dragons clashed. A boom erupted with a miserable shriek. The flying rain dragon swallowed 3 of the 8 heads. The remaining 5 shrieked frantically, trying to bite back. The flying rain dragon lifted its head and roared, its dignity affronted. Its body swelled several hundred meters larger, then slammed into the flood dragon. Everything shook as a massive explosion rippled out. The 5 remaining heads shrieked, and its entire body trembled. Terror filled its faces as it began retreating when a boom erupted. The flood dragon exploded into blood and flesh. The flying rain dragon swallowed it in one gulp. Mosai was terrified. His mind reeled as he backed up. "I forfeit," he cried in terror. A golden light swirled from the shield, pulling him from the platform. The flying rain dragon roared. Flames erupted as if its body were burning, rising skyward as it shot toward Mosai. As he was pulled from the shield, the flying rain dragon slammed into the golden light. "When Meng Hao wants to kill someone, nobody can interfere," said Meng Hao coolly. He lifted his right finger. The image of a greenwood tree appeared on his forehead as wood-type power emanated toward the shield. Since the shield was made of wood and metal-type energy, the greenwood power made it ripple and distort. The flying rain dragon stretched its head out. Just as Mosai thought he was escaping, everything went black. That was because the flying rain dragon's mouth had latched onto him. Mosai shrieked, his cry cut off by crunching sounds. The flying rain dragon swallowed his upper body. This was what it meant to break the fangs. The flying rain dragon slowly dissipated. The scene erupted into uproar among the 5 crow divinity tribes outside the shield. He's a grand dragoneer. That dragon, what kind of dragon is it? I've never seen a neo-demon like that before. Even the ancestral shield was powerless. Mosai obviously forfeited but still got killed. All eyes fell upon Meng Hao. The great father of the Crow Scout tribe stared in shock, panting. The Sky Priest glanced at him, meeting his gaze. Both saw astonishment in the other's eyes. Both were thinking exactly the same thing. Grand Dragoneer. He must have been injured in the past, and that's why his neo-demon could only appear in illusory form. He's currently incapable of summoning its true form. They weren't alone. The great fathers and priests of the other tribes reached the same conclusion. The Grand Elder of the Crow Scout tribe took a deep breath, looking at Meng Hao. His eyes no longer held hostility and contempt. Instead, he regarded Meng Hao as an equal. Wu Ling panted, her face flushed with excitement, hands clenched. She was reminded that Grandmaster Meng was her greatest asset in elevating herself and Wu Chen within the tribe. Wu Chen's eyes burned with zeal. Meng Hao wielded the might of the heavens. None had earned his greater esteem. As for the man-form outlander beast, he stood there with wide eyes, muttering to himself. All reacted similarly, including those inside the shield. Gu La breathed deeply, pain in his eyes. At last he had accepted his fate. Such power was not to be provoked, and he had no choice but to accept. Yet he was somewhat happy. The young master has grown even stronger. It seems following him won't be such a bad choice. Eyes thoughtful, he considered how to climb higher than Meng Hao's zookeeper. As everyone reeled, the old woman, white-haired old man, and fisherman-dressed dragoneer moved as one. Their neo-demons roared toward Meng Hao, unguarded without his illusory flying rain dragon. Greed burned in their eyes. As dragoneers, they could discern his illusory dragon was flawed and wouldn't last long. If they killed him, they could seize his other neo-demons. He's an injured grand dragoneer. He's not like the true legendary ones who are impossible to kill. To run into an injured grand dragoneer like this is actually good fortune for me. The 3 attacked in unison, having reached an understanding. Gu La had only recently joined the tribes, and the other vassals didn't know him well enough to include him. As they attacked, Meng Hao turned, killing intent radiating from his eyes. He waved his hand, and the eyeless larva totem activated. Strands of silk flew out to surround him. Meng Hao stood motionless as the 3 neo-demons screamed toward him. "Shameless," Wu Ling cried, anxiety in her eyes. The Crow Scout members looked indignant. The Great Father, Sky Priest, and Grand Elder flew to rescue him, but the other tribes' leaders blocked them. On the platform, Gu La watched. His expression flickered, then without hesitation, he sent his horde screaming toward the 3 dragoneers. A massive roar erupted from Meng Hao. The eyeless larva's silk strands spun rapidly, then shot outward in all directions, slashing the neo-demons into clouds of blood. Moments later, Meng Hao walked from the sea of blood, silk still spinning around him. He looked coldly at his 3 attackers. Their expressions flickered as they retreated. The old woman's eyes flickered with anger. Her giant cyclops ape, held in reserve, charged toward Meng Hao. "Wild giant," Meng Hao said coolly. The wild giant roared and dashed forward, seizing the cyclops ape and biting down as blood sprayed. The ape screamed. The old woman's face twisted, and she moved to retreat when white light flashed. Big Harry stood behind her, eyes cold and grim. He bit savagely into her neck. She tried to struggle, but the black bat appeared, its fangs sinking into her. She screamed as it drained her life force. In moments, she was a withered corpse. Meanwhile, the white-haired old man on his white crane shot toward the shield, attempting to flee. Once outside, he glanced back at Meng Hao, face pale and sighed with relief. Atop the platform, Meng Hao walked toward the old fisherman. "Parrot," he said. The parrot in human form roared and charged at the old man who had emerged. His cry of alarm became a shriek as he was torn apart. The white crane's screams were even more blood-curdling. On the platform, the weaker dragoneers fled. Only Meng Hao, Gu La, and the old fisherman remained. The old fisherman's face was ashen as Meng Hao strode toward him. The man's presence trampled his heart and mind. Intense pressure bore down. He couldn't flee. Even an injured Grand Dragoneer wasn't to be provoked. But this was life or death. Survival blazed in his eyes. He waved his hand, his earthworm shrieked. The worms in the magical silt flew up, attaching to the giant earthworm. They became tentacles, making it monstrous. The old fisherman spat up blood and began chanting, hands moving. "Occult karma magic," he cried. The earthworm lowered its head, opening its mouth in shocking fashion and swallowed him whole. The worm's head bulged and the fisherman's face appeared. "I can't fight a Grand Dragoneer," he cried. "But this occult karma magic lets me merge with a neo-demon and become something new. Even if you are a Grand Dragoneer, you can't fight me now." Meng Hao's expression flickered. He retreated, unprecedented seriousness on his face. His cultivation rotated fully, eyes gleaming with power, but he looked not at the man, at something above. What had caught his attention was actually the occult karma magic. Within it, he sensed the Jai clan's aura. Suddenly, a vortex appeared in the sky. A silver string, a fishing line, appeared within it, shooting down toward the man who had merged with the earthworm. 1. This will surely cause some readers to recall a scene from chapter 307. Instantly, everything went silent. Everything went motionless, even the Great Fathers, as if the entire world had frozen. Everyone became fishes on a chopping block, awaiting the fishing line to hook them and pull them away. Only he could see this silver thread. This chapter was sponsored by Eric Haneby, Dennis Liu, Seth Karp, and L.A. Chapter 422, Karmic Severing 1. The term karmic severing came up before in chapter 208. The world was silent. Nothing moved. Even the golden shield seemed eternal, its rays of light had stopped. The tribe members were like clay statues, motionless. Even the old man who had used the occult karma magic to merge into the gigantic earthworm was frozen in midair like a statue. A maniacal laugh plastered onto his face. The only things that could move were Meng Hao and the silver line in the air. Danger washed over Meng Hao. The Jai clan had forced him to flee the southern domain. Now they appeared again, here in the western desert. Silver light floated lazily off the line as it whistled down. Ripples emanated, capable of ripping apart the air. Meng Hao wasn't the target. The line hooked the old earthworm man. No one could see it happening. Meng Hao breathed heavily, not daring to move. He stood motionless, trying to look like everyone else, attempting to not even think. The hook at the end of the line stabbed effortlessly through the earthworm's body, piercing it completely. The old earthworm man was now bait on the hook. Meng Hao's mind spun, and his heart was pounding. It's not a thread, it's a fishing line. Meng Hao remained motionless but could see everything. The old earthworm man was wrenched up into the sky. An archaic voice spoke leisurely from above. "So, cultivators in the western desert practice occult karma magic. You've turned yourself into bait. I can use you to fish, perhaps snag a big fish here. Since you're bait, you have no need for karma." As the voice echoed, Meng Hao suddenly saw threads attached to everyone present, faint, flickering, containing fate itself. All threads seemed connected. Neo-demons, cultivators, mountains, rivers, all things were filled with these threads, spreading and connecting, even to the earthworm man. Everything was connected into an enormous living web. Anything seen or remembered caused a merging of karma strings, connecting everything. "Henceforth, let your karma be extinguished," said the ancient voice. The threads attached to the earthworm began to collapse and be destroyed. The elimination caused a chain reaction. All threads connected to mountains, rivers, the land, neo-demons, and cultivators began to tremble. More shocking was that the surrounding cultivators trembled, faces pale. The threads attached to the earthworm shattered. Any connection or memory they had regarding the old earthworm man collapsed. Now it seemed as if the balance of karma had been disturbed. By forcibly erasing the karma that had been sown, it affected the rest of karma in all creation. Meng Hao's mind trembled. The threads attached to his body trembled and seemed on the verge of collapsing. An unspeakable power spread through the world. Any vestige or memory of the old earthworm man was being wiped out. As his mind reeled, the demon-sealing Jade vibrated in his bag. A warm, gentle power emanated to envelop him. The threads appeared to collapse, but the massive power washed over him, preserving his memories of the old earthworm man. Suddenly, the earthworm man up above transformed into a beam of light that shot up into the sky, and then disappeared. Finally, the still world began to move again. As things returned to normal, everyone shuddered. Golden light emanated around the platform. Gula's confusion was quickly replaced with happiness. With a shout, he proclaimed his forfeiture and was pulled from the platform. Nothing existed in his memories regarding the old fisherman. He only remembered Meng Hao's fabulous victory over the other dragoneers. Outside the shield, the great fathers of the 5 tribes recovered, gazes focusing on Meng Hao. Their memories held nothing of the old fisherman. It was as if he had never existed. The Crow Scout tribe has recruited a grand dragoneer. The Crow Scout tribe must have paid a hefty price in preparation for this ancestor right competition. Otherwise, they would never have been able to convince a grand dragoneer to work for them. As the 5 tribes buzzed with conversation, Meng Hao stood ashen-faced on the platform. No one looked different from before. None were aware that everything had stopped moments ago. They had no reaction to the earthworm man's disappearance. His life didn't exist within their memories. All the old man's karma had been completely severed from everything: neo-demons, mountains, rivers, land. Not a trace remained in any consciousness. Meng Hao looked around, panting, face pale. Fear consumed him. Now that is death, true death, to be erased from all memories as if you never existed. So that is the karma line of the Jai clan. Suddenly, Meng Hao recalled the fishing rod in his bag of holding, the one he had acquired when he slayed one of the sons of Jai. Now he understood the function of that rod. If the fishing line had hooked him instead, all traces of his existence would have been erased. The Jai clan. Meng Hao's face was pale. He waved his right hand to collect up his neo-demon horde, then strode off of the platform. The wild giant accompanied him as he left. Meng Hao ignored the gazes and words, looking up at the sky, face dark. No one could understand what he felt. Even the parrot seemed unaware of what happened. Perhaps this wasn't because the parrot wasn't powerful enough, but rather because it didn't care enough about the old earthworm man to notice. Perhaps it had even been willing to allow it to happen. Maybe it would have been different if the karmic severing was directed at someone important to it. Finally, Meng Hao looked back at the 5 Crow divinity tribes. The Crow Scout tribe had clearly won the right to enter the Crow divinity Holy Land first. Using their bloodline powers along with a special technique, the 5 tribes of the Crow divinity fully opened the Crow divinity Holy Land. The Crow Scout tribe cheered. The Great Father and Sky Priest clasped hands in thanks to Meng Hao. The Crow Scout tribe and Meng Hao turned into colorful beams, shooting toward the golden light. The platform faded, replaced by 2 massive doors opening slowly. Before the doors, the Great Father clasped hands to Meng Hao and the man-form Outlander Beast. Many thanks, Grandmaster Meng and fellow Taoist Dao. As promised, you may enter the pool of destiny with the tribe. Meng Hao nodded distractedly as he looked at the opening doors. The karma line of the Jai clan is so powerful, it erases every trace of existence. Meng Hao was lost in thought as the doors opened. When they were about half open, a tremor ran through him. His face flickered. That was because he had suddenly been struck with a new realization. Oh no, the karma line severs karma completely, prohibiting all memory of the erased. But if someone remembers the technique is incomplete, it failed. Not good. Meng Hao's face fell. The technique's user would detect the failure. He had little time. His body flickered as he shot toward the doors. Almost the instant he flew forward, the entire world suddenly grew still. Suddenly, the fishing line, which had so recently disappeared, could be seen again up in the sky. This time, it was shooting down toward Meng Hao. So a little fish slipped through the net, said the archaic voice, chuckling. You dare to spoil my karmic severing. Thankfully, you left some clues behind that I noticed, nor are you capable of causing my technique to backfire against me. The heavens are large and the earth is wide, but do you really think you can escape me? Around Meng Hao, everything was silent and unmoving. Chapter 423, A Fortunate Chance. Meng Hao had practiced cultivation for many years, from Mount Daqing until now experiencing many deadly situations. However, this crisis was the greatest he had ever faced. The consequences of killing one of the sons of Jai had been enormous. Recently, he had sensed signs that the mastiff might be beginning to awaken, which gave him a bit of confidence. Except now. Having seen the old earthworm man's death, Meng Hao knew that there was absolutely no way for him to fight back against this unheard-of karmic severing. His face was pale. Everything around him was completely still, tribe members, neo-demons, clouds. Only the fishing line and Meng Hao could move. He shot as quickly as possible through the golden light, passing through the massive doors with all the speed he could muster. He exploded with the power of the great circle of the gold core, vanishing inside. However, even as Meng Hao entered the doors, the fishing line came in after him. The speed with which it moved was incredible as it followed him. This door was no teleportation device, but rather a passageway. When Meng Hao emerged from the other side, he saw that he was surrounded by mountains. These mountains were a murky golden color, and a faintly discernible pressure could be felt from them. In the distance in front of him were a collection of mountains that had no peaks, but rather gaping holes at the top. What appeared to be scorching heat billowed out from the holes. These were volcanoes. In total, there were 7 of them, all linked together. This place was the Crow Divinity Tribe's holy land and also the domain of the Golden Crow. After entering, Meng Hao didn't pause for even a moment. However, even as he shot forward, the air around him started to fill with what looked like cracks. The cracks emanated a fearsome qi. Meng Hao got the feeling that if he ran into one of them, his body would most likely be torn into pieces. Meng Hao could actually sense a strange qi filling this entire volcanic realm. It was strange and multifarious, as if countless neo-demons were present. As Meng Hao flew forward, he suddenly caught sight of a black wind off in the distance. It seemed as if it sensed his encroachment into this area and was flying to intercept him. This black wind was actually composed of countless black crows. There were more than 1,000 of them, blotting out the sky as they flew. Their speed was incredible, and as they neared, Meng Hao could see that their eyes were bright red and filled with frenzy. In fact, from the cultivation base ripples emanating out from the more than 1,000 crows, Meng Hao could tell that they were level 7, comparable to the early core formation stage. There were even 10 of them who were level 9. Meng Hao's face flickered. However, it was at this point that the silver fishing line shot out into the Crow Divinity Holy Land. It emanated an intense rumbling that spread out with the power of stillness. Soon, everything within the Crow Divinity Holy Land began to grow quiet and still. The grass stopped swaying, and the cracks appearing in the air suddenly seemed to have been slowed to a standstill. As for the approaching flock of black crows, it stopped moving completely. Even the waves of heat erupting from the volcanoes ceased moving. However, up ahead, in the centermost of the 7 volcanoes, was a location that seemed to be a point of freedom within all the stillness. There's life force there, thought Meng Hao, his eyes glittering. He immediately began to fly in that direction. Behind him, the silver line pursued at incredible speed. At its end could just barely be seen the glint of what must be a hook. This takes some time to describe, but happened extremely quickly. Meng Hao exploded forward with all the power of his cultivation base. He used the bloodburst flash without hesitation, causing him to flicker in and out of the air as he moved. He moved in jumps of hundreds of meters, not holding anything back in this moment of grave crisis. In the blink of an eye, he was directly next to the flock of motionless black crows. He was just about to continue on his way, when suddenly he felt a tremor in his heart. Because of the presence of the fishing line, everything has stopped moving, even these neo-demons. You could say that this is the kind of opportunity that comes around only once in 1,000 years. In the entire time that the Crow Divinity Holy Land has existed, something like this has most likely never occurred. It would really be far too much of a shame to let this opportunity slip by. It's a risk that I'm willing to take. His eyes shone with a bright light that transformed into determination. Immediately, he waved his right hand toward the motionless crows. They had absolutely no control of themselves as they turned into beams of blackness that shot into his bag of the cosmos. That having been accomplished, he once again proceeded forward. Behind him, the fishing line neared. Panting, Meng Hao bit the tip of his tongue and then sprayed some blood out of his mouth. His body flickered as the bloodburst flash activated, propelling him off into the distance. His face was pale, but he didn't hesitate at all. In an instant, he had reached an area that grew thick with grass. There, he could see a group of 7 or 8 poisonous wasps hovering motionless in midair. Behind them was a gigantic wasp nest which was surrounded by dozens more wasps. Seeing them, Meng Hao gritted his teeth, then waved his right hand. Immediately, the wasps in the wasp nest were gathered up. Then, he bloodburst flashed again. This is an extremely rare opportunity. I have to take advantage of it. Meng Hao was shouting inwardly, but at the same time, somewhat conflicted. This was a moment of extreme grave danger, perhaps the most critical he had experienced since he had begun practicing cultivation. However, this moment of crisis had transformed this crow divinity holy land into an unprecedented bit of good fortune. This good fortune had caused everything in the area to become motionless, allowing Meng Hao free access to a variety of neodemons. Such an opportunity caused even Meng Hao's heart to begin to pound. That was especially true when he happened to look into the mouth of one of the motionless volcanoes. There he could see an enormous lizard half emerged from the volcano. It was dozens of meters long. Meng Hao was now even more conflicted. "Put everything on the line," he roared. His body flickered as he shot toward the lizard. With the wave of a right hand, he collected it into his bag of the cosmos. Then he spit some more blood out of his mouth to shoot away at incredible speed. At this moment, it was almost like Meng Hao had forgotten about the danger to his life. Whenever he saw a neodemon, he would shoot toward it and collect it up. One neodemon horde and superpowerful neodemon after another, things which had existed for countless years within the Crow Divinity Holy Land, creatures which no one had ever been able to collect even throughout all the years in which the 5 tribes had offered sacrifices to the ancestor, dangerous beasts which normally could only be avoided with special techniques, were all completely motionless, making it extremely convenient for Meng Hao to seize them. A group of more than 1,000 green mosquitoes were sitting stock still within the mouth of a volcano, apparently just on their way inside to fight a gigantic crocodile that was half submerged in the lava inside. The mouthparts of the mosquitoes emitted a mysterious glow, and their bodies were ferocious-looking, covered with countless fur-like spikes. They were completely shocking in appearance. As for the crocodile, it was bright red, with 2 pitch-black eyes. It lay half submerged in the lava, emanating shocking ripples. How many neodemon hordes are in this place? Thought Meng Hao, his eyes widening. The twisted feeling inside of him could not be any more intense. Behind him, the silver line whistled toward him with increasing speed. It was no less than 150 meters away. Damn it! Meng Hao's eyes were red as he once again utilized the bloodburst flash. He reappeared at the mouth of the volcano, where he waved his right hand. Immediately, the mosquitoes and the shocking red crocodile were sucked into his bag of the cosmos. His body flickered once again as he fled away. By now, the silver line was about 100 meters away from him and moving even faster through the air. The sense of grave crisis was incredibly intense. Meng Hao's eyes were completely bloodshot, and he now had no time to consider any surrounding neodemons. Instead, he continued to head forward toward the apparently active volcano which was his goal. Except, even as he neared it, he noticed that up ahead was, shockingly, a burial mound. The burial mound was covered in cracks, making the coffin inside clearly visible. Inside the coffin was a corpse which was half human and half beast, completely bizarre in appearance. What set Meng Hao panting, however, was that laying on top of the corpse's chest was a wooden sword. The instant he saw the wooden sword, his eyes went wide. Meng Hao could tell that this corpse was not in fact dead. In fact, its eyes were open. Also, despite the stillness everywhere, he could still sense a threatening aura coming from it, and a powerful pressure similar to the spirit's severing stage. "This is the 3rd wooden sword I've found," he thought, breathing heavily. Having seen the sword, he knew that he must have it. Including his duplicate sword, it would increase the number of wooden swords he had to 4. As for the origin of this sword, Meng Hao wasn't sure. But his intuition told him that considering it cost 2,000 ultra-high-grade spirit stones to duplicate, it was obviously beyond ordinary. As for why it hadn't manifested its true majesty, perhaps it was because he hadn't acquired enough of them yet. Meng Hao had the intense sensation that if he did not take advantage of this peculiar situation, then he would never again have a chance to snatch the wooden sword from this bizarre corpse. Feeling both miserable and happy, he bit down viciously on his tongue, changing directions and shooting toward the corpse. As soon as he neared the burial mound, his hand shot in through one of the cracks and grabbed the wooden sword. As he wrenched it out, he could faintly hear a snarl of profound rage coming from the corpse. There was no time for any further examination. Meng Hao's body flickered as he shot toward the volcano in the very center. Almost in the exact moment that he entered it, the pursuing silver line did the same. This chapter was sponsored by Grigory Edel and Nicholas Hahn. /expand. The archaic voice boomed out from the sky to echo about within the volcano. "Flee to the remotest corners of the earth, and you will still be incapable of evading me." Meng Hao was only about 10 meters ahead of the silver line, his face pale. It really seemed as if what the voice said was true. Meng Hao was incapable of evasion. There was lava inside this volcano, as well as one location deep within that appeared to be a cistern. The rock surrounding the cistern had been chiseled into stone steps, which in turn formed a pool of water. Meng Hao neared. He passed through multiple restrictive spells. These restrictive spells were set up to prevent anyone not of the Crow divinity tribe from nearing. Any outsider who attempted to approach without the help of a Crow divinity tribe member would be killed. However, Meng Hao was being followed by the fishing line. As it neared, it caused everything to cease moving, even all of the bizarre and fantastic things inside of the volcano. The restrictive spells were also static now, and any hindering power was rendered useless. Meng Hao shot forward with all of the speed he could muster. From ancient times until now, he was the first outsider to ever come to this place alone. This event was unprecedented. As Meng Hao neared the pool of destiny, waves and ripples could be seen on its surface. However, Meng Hao had nothing to be happy about. His eyes radiated despair. Earlier, he had hoped that there would be something here he could use to fight back against the silver line, which was why he had headed in this direction. Unfortunately, it seemed that the pond was the only thing here. Nowhere to go. His gaze flickered about, and he sent his spiritual sense billowing out. After confirming that there really was nothing else in the area besides the pool of destiny, he gave a wan smile. The pool of destiny. It seems I have nowhere to go and no other options. Well, if I'm really going to perish, then I'll go out fighting, and I'll do it in this pool of destiny. His eyes shining with vicious determination, his body flickered and he stepped foot into the pool of destiny. The very moment that he did, the silver line finally reached him. It wrapped him up immediately, binding him tightly. As soon as the line touched him, Meng Hao's mind filled with a roaring sound, and he felt as if his soul was about to fly out of his body. It was as if his mind and his body were completely split apart. A sensation of icy coldness appeared within his soul. He suddenly had the sense that a deadly crisis was imminent. As I said, you're not strong enough to hide from me. Do you really think you can measure up to the people in the past who tried to evade my grasp? When I've hooked your karma, everything is over. Hold on. You already have traces of karma from the Jai clan. It's faint and it looks like you're almost on the verge of completely erasing it. Since it's still here though, I think I'll just take a look and see who you are. Let's see. Meng Hao killed one of the sons of Jai, wanted by the Jai clan. Oh, so it's you. I guess it's just your destiny to run into me here. I might as well settle the karma you have with the Jai clan. I am Jai 19. I shall bequeath thee with the Jai clan's karmic severing. Meng Hao's body was trembling. He felt as if his consciousness and his body were being ripped apart. His soul felt as if it were in fetters, as if some massive force were preparing to wrench it out of his body. 1. A similar name was mentioned in chapter 310. In the original release, I translated it a bit different but adjusted it later. He was filled with confusion, and his cultivation base vanished. Even his demon sealing powers disappeared. It was as if he was nothing more than a mortal, so weak that he could do absolutely nothing to fight back. The only thing he was aware of were the words spoken by the archaic voice, which echoed about in his head. Karmic severing. He could vaguely see a vast assortment of faint, flickering threads connected to his body. These threads were his fate and karma, massed together and stretching out into the air, connected to who knew what. Suddenly, Meng Hao could see that deep within him, a power was spreading out to these threads and to his very life force. Sever, said the archaic voice. The instant the word came out of his mouth, the world shook as if it were being struck with lightning. Meng Hao's body trembled violently as he watched the threads connected to his body beginning to collapse, as if some intangible blade were beginning to chop through them. They shattered, causing a chain reaction which destroyed even more of the threads. It was impossible to say whose memories these threads connected to, but in this instant, they were falling into pieces. It didn't matter how much distance was involved, the threads were destroyed. The effect began to spread about throughout all the lands of South Heaven. In the western desert, outside the golden light, everything was completely still. All the members of the 5 great Crow divinity tribes suddenly shivered. Their faces went pale and filled with blankness. Within their memories, any trace of Meng Hao was erased, almost as if it were completely severed away. Wu Ling, Wu Chen, Wu Hai, all of the tribe members from the 5 great tribes suddenly had not even a scrap of a memory of Meng Hao within their minds. Mo Li and Old Devil Wang. Even Yan Song and eccentric Li Tao all trembled as the karma threads connecting them to Meng Hao were destroyed. It was like a gigantic invisible blade was slashing down. As it headed toward the man-form outlander beast, it met up against a powerful force that struggled back against it. The man's body shook, but in the end, the blade descended nonetheless. The voice of the parrot suddenly came out of the man's mouth in a faint roar. Jai Clan immortal, this time Lord Fifth will not forget. The blade swept past, slicing across Gula, erasing Meng Hao's existence. It spread out toward the Black Lands. As for the stillness, it did not touch the Black Lands. It was limited to the area in the western desert surrounding the Crow divinity tribes. At the moment, Black Land's palace Dao Child Luo Chang was sitting cross-legged in meditation. His body suddenly shook, and he coughed up a mouthful of blood. He looked up, an expression of confusion on his face. In the Church of the Golden Light, the members of the congregation all began to tremble and cough up blood. Perplexed looks appeared on their faces, as if they had forgotten something, but weren't sure what. The invisible blade swept across the Black Lands, erasing any vestige that Meng Hao had ever been there. It continued on toward the southern domain. Currently, Fatty was contentedly filing away at his teeth and holding a pretty girl in his arm. He was murmuring something to her when suddenly his body trembled and his face flickered. He then coughed up 7 or 8 mouthfuls of blood. His face was ashen as he looked around in confusion. "What's wrong?" asked the girl, looking alarmed as she rubbed him gently. "Nothing, it seems like I just forgot someone. Weird." During this moment, it wasn't just Fatty who was affected. Chen Fan and all the other people within whose memories existed the image of Meng Hao suddenly coughed up blood and then looked around in confusion. As of this moment, all traces of Meng Hao that existed within their memories were blotted out. All karma threads of theirs which were entangled with Meng Hao were crushed. As of now, their lives did not contain anyone who went by the name of Meng Hao or of Grandmaster Pill Cauldron. "Damn it, just how famous is this guy in the southern domain?" said the archaic voice, sounding shocked. "There are so many people connected to him by karma." He sounded flustered and disbelieving. The art of karmic severing is a magic which consumes energy in correlation to the amount of connections that are severed. It was definitely an astonishing technique, but one needed to be careful when using it. Su Qing sat meditating in her immortal's cave in the Black Sieve sect. It was evening outside. Suddenly she opened her eyes and let out a soft sigh. Her hand reached into her robe, where a small pill bottle was stored, within which was a cosmetic cultivation pill. It was at this moment that a tremor ran through her and she coughed up not 1, but a total of 9 mouthfuls of blood. Her face was pale, and she was shaking violently. She could feel the existence of Meng Hao within her memories beginning to shake and collapse, forcibly being erased. "No," she cried. Her hair was instantly thrown into disarray, and she began to flash an incantation gesture to fight back. The only result was more coughing up of blood. "Meng Hao, Meng Hao." Her cultivation base began to rotate rapidly, as she prepared to use all the strength she could summon to resist. However, even as her cultivation base began to move, she said, "Meng Hao, who's that?" She sat there mutely, a blank expression on her face. She tried to remember who Meng Hao was and why she was rotating her cultivation base. She could tell that her heart was in the process of breaking and unconsciously reached up to her face. She felt tears. "Why do I hurt so much?" she thought. "Why am I crying?" Throughout the southern domain, an invisible karmic storm raged. The raging tempest was strongest in the Violet Fate sect. Everyone in the entire sect trembled and coughed up blood. Chu Yuyan's face was pale and her fists were clenched tightly. She laughed bitterly as she felt her memories changing. Meng Hao was being completely wiped away. She quickly lifted her hand up and then bit her tongue. Spitting the blood onto her finger, she began to write 2 characters onto the wall next to her. Meng Hao. However, after she wrote the character Meng, her hand stopped moving and a look of bewilderment appeared on her face. What was I writing? Pill Demon sat in his short mountain, looking off into the sky. It wasn't clear what he was thinking, but as the invisible blade neared him, he sat there and sighed. "So this day has finally come, has it?" He shook his head bitterly, but a brilliant light shone in his eyes. He lifted his right hand, within which appeared a medicinal pill. The pill emanated an archaic chi and was clearly incredibly old. "If you sever my apprentice's karma," he thought, "then I will absolutely never give in and become an immortal of the Jai clan." With that, he closed his eyes and watched in anguish as everything within his memories that existed regarding Meng Hao was turned into nothing but ash. The pill in his hand emanated shocking aura. which caused these drifting pieces of memory ash to suddenly be reformed anew, unaffected. "Damn it, he has something like that as his master," echoed the archaic voice. It sounded furious. "It's a pity my cultivation base isn't sufficient. If it were, then everything would be wiped out." The blade continued to sweep across the southern domain. However, when it reached the rebirth cave, the cold voice of a woman could be heard. "A false immortal from the Jade clan. Do you truly dare to try to wipe out my memories? Screw off." The sound echoed out into the air. The archaic voice, filled with disbelief and alarm, weakly responded. "He's even connected to that figure in the rebirth cave. Damn it, damn it, who else does this guy know? How come his karma is so hard to sever?" Chapter 425. The Severing Cannot Continue. Out on the Milky Way sea floated an island. If you looked at the island from up above in the sky, it had the appearance of a turtle. This island had been quite a mystery in the Milky Way sea during past years. It floated about here and there, surrounded by mists. Suddenly the floating island stopped, and an astonishing bellow of rage could be heard from within. "Screw off, bastard, I just fell asleep and now you come bothering me. You think I want those memories of that twerp Meng Hao? Damn it, screw off." Patriarch Reliance's thunderous voice echoed out, kicking up huge waves on the Milky Way sea. The archaic voice anxiously said, "How could something like that even exist? How do I accomplish this severing? How?" He sounded completely flustered and exasperated, shaking, because of Meng Hao's very existence. On another island in the Milky Way sea was a stooped old man who was currently standing in front of an artist's easel, painting a picture of the tall, strapping man who stood in front of him. In the middle of making a brushstroke, the old man suddenly frowned and looked up into the sky. A profound glow suddenly appeared. "People who exist in my memory cannot have their karma severed by the heavens of Jai," he said softly. He lifted his right hand into the air and then waved his paintbrush. A drop of ink flew out which then merged into the air. Suddenly, the entire sky in the region turned completely black. A miserable shriek could be heard echoing out from the void. The voice was none other than that of ancient Jai 19. As the shriek filled the air, all of the cultivators who were affected by the destruction of the karma threads suddenly shook. The threads connecting them to Meng Hao suddenly began to recover. They returned from absolute destruction to form once again. In fact, because they were being reformed out of destruction, they were even stronger and more tenacious than before. Chu Yuyan's face was pale white. Her closed eyes opened, and she looked silently at the character Meng written on the wall. She slowly lifted her hand up and wrote the character Hao. Pill Demon put away the medicinal pill and looked wordlessly off into the distance. However, his eyes were filled with staunchness and determination. Fatty rubbed his head as he thought confusedly about past events. Suddenly, his body trembled and he gasped. There were now many more memories of the past. His face flickered as he recalled Meng Hao. Chen Fan was the same, as was the entirety of the lands of the southern domain. In the Black Lands and the Western Desert, all of the cultivators whose karma threads had been affected were suddenly recovered. Su Qing gnawed at her lips silently. She looked at the pill bottle in her hand, and her eyes filled with deep anxiety. She now remembered everything that had happened and was filled with coldness. She could only imagine the loneliness she would experience if Meng Hao's image did not exist within her memories. Within her silence, she clenched her teeth. She knew that power was the only way to truly resolve problems. She was now more determined than ever to fully fuse with the memories of Matriarch Phoenix and increase the level of her cultivation base. Back in the Western Desert in the Crow Divinity Holy Land, within the depths of the volcano, Meng Hao stood trembling in the pool of destiny. He, too, heard the miserable shriek. As it echoed about, he opened his eyes to see the silver fishing line turning black. The blackness spread, and as it did, the line turned into smoke and ashes. The ash and smoke spread out amidst the shriek. The sound of the shriek caused Meng Hao's eyes to glow with coldness. He hadn't been able to see what had happened just now, but he had witnessed the severing of the karma of the old earthworm man. He could only imagine the death he had just experienced. Killing intent radiated out from his eyes as he caught sight of an indistinct figure in front of him. It was the image of a cultivator surrounded by black flames, screaming as he struggled to disappear from this place. The indistinct figure was repeatedly calling out a name. "Shui Dongliu, it's Shui Dongliu." Meng Hao's eyes glittered. His left hand raised up and placed the blood-colored mask onto his face. Massive, frenzied power exploded from his cultivation base. Blood chi emanated out in waves as he charged forward. Blood finger, blood palm, blood death world. They all appeared, causing massive roaring to fill the air as they descended upon the illusory figure. Meng Hao's killing intent soared as he waved his hand again. The lotus sword formation appeared. As it rotated, the power of time rippled out. "Die!" shouted Meng Hao, his voice ice cold. His hand flickered an incantation and he pointed forward. The violet chi guillotine, violet chi garrote, violet gibbous moon exploded out with a roar, causing violet light to billow up. Without a face, a single word, the flames of war unify. Meng Hao lifted up his left hand and pressed down onto the mask. Immediately, a gigantic face appeared. It opened its mouth and spoke a voiceless word. A roaring sound filled the air as it shot toward the illusory figure. As the miserable screaming continued, Meng Hao charged forward, slipping on the Fang Clan glove. He punched, and a massive rumbling could be heard. Meng Hao's killing intent soared as he punched over and over again, more than 100 times. Each of these fists contained incredible power. Rumbling sounded out without end, and the illusory figure seemed to be on the verge of bursting into pieces. It appeared to have been sealed, rendering it incapable of making any moves whatsoever. Even its cultivation base was weak beyond compare. It was still trying to disappear and escape, but Meng Hao performed another incantation, and the 8th demon sealing hex appeared. As the figure suddenly stopped moving, Meng Hao's face distorted with the desire to kill. None of his magical arts seemed to have any effect on this figure, and yet Meng Hao was not willing to let him escape. He had killed one of the sons of Jai, and he wasn't afraid to kill this Jai 19. That was especially true considering that if he didn't kill him right now, when he was at his weakest, then the man would no doubt cause endless troubles in the future. Gritting his teeth, Meng Hao pressed down again onto the blood-colored mask. "Flag of 3 streamers," he growled. This was the most powerful magical item he possessed. Considering the current level of his cultivation base, he could, with effort, wield 1 streamer. This time, it didn't appear in illusory form either. As soon as the words left his mouth, power filled the area as a long, blood-colored streamer appeared. As soon as it left Meng Hao's hand, heaven and earth shook. It shot forward, wrapping around the figure of Jai 19, dragging him. Jai 19 let out a horrified scream filled with shock, fear, and disbelief. This is the Mountain and Sea Emperor's banner," he cried out in alarm as roaring shook his body. Suddenly, what had been illusory, only partly in the same world as Meng Hao, was now forcibly dragged out. There, standing directly in front of Meng Hao, was an old man. He was clearly in very sore straits. His face was covered with a burning black ink, and his aura was in absolute chaos. Currently, it seemed he was being forcibly repressed, and was now only able to wield the power of core formation. His face was filled with astonishment. He could scarcely believe that he had actually been pulled into this world. Impossible, it can't be the Emperor's banner. The legendary Emperor's banner was destroyed. "What Emperor's banner be \TCH, said Meng Hao, his face contorted with fury as he thought about how he had just basically died. Then he recalled what Shui Dongliu had said years ago, that people he remembered could not have their karma severed by the Jai clan. He was certain that without Shui Dongliu, he would most likely be dead. In his fury, he unthinkingly imitated the parrot's wording. With that, he clenched his hand into a fist and punched. A boom filled the air, and the old man let out a cry. "You trifling mortal, do you dare to injure me? You!" Boom! "Do you dare to kill me?" Boom! Meng Hao struck out repeatedly with his incredibly powerful fist, pummeled the old man until his body was on the verge of exploding. However, the man's cultivation base was fundamentally intrepid. Despite being attacked in such a way, his body was recovering rapidly. "Puny mortal, you injured me and dragged me out from the world of Jai. But just wait until I'm fully recovered. I'll kill you with my bare hands." Meng Hao's eyes flickered with coldness and retracted his right hand. He glared coldly at the old man, which caused the old man to stare in shock. Then, the old man began to laugh coldly. The instant he began to laugh, however, Meng Hao's right hand flickered an incantation, and then he pushed down onto the old man's forehead. "It would be a pity to kill you. However, your blood, along with the blood of that son of Jai that I killed, can help me to create my blood spirit. My recovery will quickly outpace whatever tiny injuries you inflict on me," said the old man, his tone vicious. Suddenly, Meng Hao waved his hand, and the lotus sword formation appeared. Rippling power of time flowed out, relentlessly pounding against the old man. The old man's face fell, but he let out a cold snort nonetheless. "If it were twice as powerful, maybe it could affect me, but that level of time power is simply not enough." Not enough? Asked Meng Hao, his eyes flickering icily. He instantly produced his 4 wooden swords and stabbed them into the man's body to hinder his recovery. The old man was inherently tyrannical and haughty, but the instant he saw the 4 wooden swords, and especially when they stabbed into him, he had no choice but to scream miserably. Damn it, those are immortal murdering swords. You, just who are you? How can you have so many? Although they're not completely unsealed, they really are immortal murdering swords. His injuries suddenly worsened and his recovery slowed down to a crawl. Thanks to Meng Hao's many forms of torment, Jai 19 was in an incredibly wretched predicament. There's still more time to cause you suffering, said Meng Hao, coldness flickering within his gaze. Meanwhile, the Great Tang in the eastern lands exists a luxurious mansion. Sitting inside was the girl with the explosive temper that Meng Hao had met that year, Fang Yu. She was currently wiping some blood off of her mouth. How could Jai 19 ever have imagined that the effects of his karmic severing would reach all the way to the Great Tang in the eastern lands, and Fang Yu? 1. Meng Hao met Fang Yu in chapter 309, in the events leading up to the end of Book 3. She initially attacked him, but backed off after seeing the mark on his hand, whereupon she threw an epic temper tantrum. Fang Yu's face filled with fury, and she rose to her feet. She was about to walk out the door when suddenly a woman's voice could be heard, shocking and furious to the extreme. It came from the restricted area in the back of the mansion. Ji Clan. When she heard the voice, Fang Yu's face flickered. She saw someone flying out from the restricted area toward her. It was an elegantly dressed middle-aged woman. Her face was beautiful but grim. As soon as she appeared, everything grew dim and the air itself began to vibrate. The land quaked and cracks appeared on the surfaces of the nearby buildings, despite the restrictive spells that protected them. "Mom," said Fang Yu, trembling. She feared no one in the world more than she did her mother. "You come with me," said the woman. This woman was none other than the woman who had appeared in the Song clan back in the southern domain. Her eyes radiated killing intent as she turned toward the Jai clan mansion, which existed in the Great Tang of the eastern lands. 2. This woman appeared in chapter 190 as well as subsequent chapters. It was in chapter 193 that the guy from the Song clan speculated that she was actually the mother of the resurrection lily. "Mom, don't do anything rash," Dad said before that. "Don't talk to me about your dad. Are you coming or not?" The woman's phoenix-like eyes radiated intense killing intent. This chapter was sponsored by Carl's Chulia Cuvas, Nicholas Hahn, Useless 5, Nightrunners Von Neumann, Derek Washburn, CKS Reddy Kumar, and LB. Chapter 426, Just This Once. Moments later, a massive roaring sound filled this luxurious mansion in the Great Tang of the eastern lands. The entire mansion shook and then began to crumble into pieces. Large groups of people quickly emerged, although they seemed quite calm. In fact, some were even having pleasant conversations in low tones. Some held books, and there was even one man who had an abacus and was walking and making calculations at the same time. Everyone seemed completely unperturbed. There was only one conclusion that could be reached. This mansion often experienced such thunderous collapse. As the mansion fell apart, the beautiful woman and Fang Yu transformed into beams of light that shot off in the direction of the Jai clan ancestral mansion. A sigh could be heard from within the collapsing mansion as a middle-aged man in scholar's clothing emerged, shaking his head. He looked at his wife and daughter disappearing in the distance and then sighed again, but did nothing to hinder them. As she flew through the air, the beautiful woman's face was filled with killing intent. She moved with shocking speed. Next to her, Fang Yu looked nervous, but she was actually quite excited inwardly. After a bit of time, the two of them neared a sprawling walled city, the entirety of which was pitch black. It was square in shape, like a giant seal that had been pressed down into the land. Located within the city was an imperial palace, which from a distance looked magnificent. Palatial structures sprawled around it, and in front was a large square in which could be seen 18 dragon statues that emanated shocking auras. This imperial palace had only one main gate, which was completely gold. Protruding from the surface of this gate were 3,927 golden nails. Each of these nails was completely out of the ordinary, and obviously could be considered a precious treasure. The gate was also carved with soaring clouds and auspicious beasts. Everything was gold, making it look like some sort of celestial gate. This was the #1 ancestral mansion of the Jai clan in all of the Great Tang of the eastern lands. In total, they had nearly 100, each one of which looked like an imperial palace, although it was. After being erected, these palaces stood mightily for years, never weakening. They were like a figurative shield for the entire clan. In any case, surrounding this imperial palace, the Jai clan members had also erected an enormous wall. The approach of Fang Yu and her mother sent out shocking ripples through the air, as well as a screaming wind. Immediately, the cultivators within the Jai clan noticed this. Halt immediately. If you take a step further, you will be executed without hesitation. Fang Yu looked over at her mother anxiously. Mom, don't do anything rash. Even as the words left her mouth, the beautiful woman lifted up her right foot and violently kicked the city gate. Immediately, a roaring sound echoed out in all directions as the entire city shook. The gate immediately collapsed into pieces, crumbling downward into dust. A gale-force wind swept out, carrying the rubble with it. What gall, you dare to make a move against the Jai clan? As the gate collapsed, howls could be heard within the city and crowds of people appeared, shooting through the air toward the gate. Are you looking to die? Mom, don't be rash. You must not under any circumstances be impulsive. Shut up, cried the beautiful woman, glaring at Fang Yu. She clenched her right hand into a fist and then slammed it into the ground, which rippled like seawaters as a massive boom echoed out. Cracks spread out in all directions, ripping the ground apart in shocking fashion. The woman, radiating killing intent, shot toward the incoming cultivators. All it took was a single punch from her, and they went flying off one by one like kites with their strings cut. They tumbled through the air, crying out miserably. The woman was like an explosively violent dragon. Everywhere she went, everything shook. It was like a whirlwind that none of the nearly 1,000 approaching cultivators could do anything to stop. Fang Yu stood off to the side. She continued to call out to her mother to not do anything rash, but her face radiated a killing intent quite similar to her mother's, along with excitement. It got to the point where she ran over, and anyone who her mom had already taken care of, she would take care of again. After the space of a few breaths passed, the sky suddenly grew dim. The city wall seemed on the verge of being completely destroyed, and the land itself was covered with countless cracks. Finally, the city wall collapsed into dust. The beautiful woman transformed into a whirlwind that swept out toward the imperial palace. In the blink of an eye, she reached the celestial gate of the imperial palace, and the enormous plaque which glowed with golden light and was covered with the more than 3,000 nails, as well as auspicious animals. Suddenly, a roar could be heard from within the city as dozens of figures shot out. Their cultivation bases emanated shocking power as they emerged. Madame Fang, are you here as a representative of the Fang clan to declare war on the Jai clan? One of the approaching figures was a white-haired old man who spoke with a grim voice. Next to him was none other than Jai 11, whose face was written with astonishment. He stared in shock at the mother-daughter pair as they approached. 1. Jai 11 was briefly mentioned in chapter 310. I'm not here representing the Fang clan. I'm here as a mother, representing myself. The beautiful woman's jaw was set, and her phoenix-like eyes radiated killing intent. She punctuated her words by once again slamming her fist down onto the ground. Heaven and earth filled with roaring, and it seemed like the air would collapse. A black wind spread out in all directions, slamming into the approaching group of dozens of Jai clan members. Their expressions immediately flickered. At the same time, Fang Yu urgently said, "Mom, don't do." Before she could finish, the beautiful woman charged toward the celestial gate of the imperial palace and punched it directly with her fist. When the blow landed, a shocking boom rang out that shook nearly half of the entire eastern lands. This celestial gate of the Jai clan had stood here in its majesty for who knew how many years. But now, cracking sounds rang out as, layer by layer, it began to completely disintegrate. As it transformed into crumbling fragments, the more than 3,000 golden nails shot toward the imperial palace to slam into the 18 dragon statues which were actually in the process of coming to life. Rumbling filled the air, and the 18 dragons let out miserable shrieks. Their bodies were unable to withstand the attack, and they exploded. By this point, half of the palace was a wreck, and the entire city was in an uproar. Anything rash, finished Fang Yu. She stared mutely at her mother and the destroyed golden gate. Meng Li, are you crazy? Howls of rage could be heard from the approaching group of a dozen or so old men. Their eyes radiated killing intent and fury, but also a bit of helplessness. You dare to harm my son. I will dismantle this entire Jai clan ancestral mansion and cut down your South Heaven gate. Others fear you Jai clan people, but not me. The killing intent boiling in the woman's eyes seemed to have no end. She had suppressed it for a long time, but could do so no longer. She strode directly in through the crumbling main gate. Fang Yu hurried after her. The mother-daughter team passed through the celestial gate, and suddenly they were in a different world. In front of them, a mountain range spread out, completely white in color. From a distance, they looked like they were covered with snow, but if you looked more closely, you would see that they were in fact made from jade. The entire mountain range was the same, and at its very highest point was a simple house. The house was encircled by palatial structures, and halfway down from the house could be seen an enormous gate-like bridge. It was richly ornamented with jade and marble, and on its surface, 3 characters were carved in flowing script that made the words look like flying dragons and dancing phoenixes. South Heaven Gate. Steps were carved into the jade mountain that led under this bridge, all the way down to the bottom of the mountain where a lake existed. The reflection of the imperial palace above could be seen on the surface of the lake. No waves existed on its surface, making the reflection very realistic. If you didn't look very closely, you might not even be able to tell the difference between the two. The mountain and the reflection of the mountain in the lake were almost identical. "Mom," said Fang Yu as soon as they entered. Normally she was quite audacious, but as of this moment she was a bit taken aback. Everything that had happened up to now was incredibly shocking. She looked at her mom, almost in a daze. The beautiful woman gave a cold snort as she looked up at the white jade mountains. At this point, a bit of dread could be seen even in her eyes. However, the dread quickly vanished, wiped away by fury and killing intent. She took a deep breath, during which time a terrifying, frenzied power suddenly rose up within her. Her hair whipped about and her eyes glowed brightly. Everything around her changed, and even the sky grew blurry as a massive pressure radiated out. Shockingly, she now had a sword in her hand. And this sword was a wooden sword. It was not the same as the 4 wooden swords that Meng Hao had acquired. Instead, it was covered with characters written in an ancient style. Sunder. Gripping the sword tightly in hand, the beautiful woman swung it toward the South Heaven Gate up on the mountain. The sword strike caused the sky above to turn black, and the ground to turn into nothingness. It was as if all of the power in the world were being sucked into this one sword and transformed into cascading sword chi. This shocking chi whistled through the air directly toward the South Heaven Gate. It was at this exact moment that the 12 old men neared. They were filled with fury, but as soon as they saw the sword, their faces filled with shock. "Damn it, immortal sundering sword. You crazy Meng. You dare to wield that immortal sundering sword here on planet South Heaven." The speed of the sword chi was such that it arrived at South Heaven Gate in the blink of an eye. However, at some unknown time directly next to South Heaven Gate, a young man had appeared. Based on his appearance, he was not very old. However, his body radiated an intangible ancientness. He looked at the incoming sword chi and then at the beautiful woman. Shaking his head, he did nothing to block it. The sword chi slammed into South Heaven Gate, causing the entire structure to shake and then collapse into pieces. The South Heaven Gate had stood from the moment the Jai clan arrived on planet South Heaven and represented their position of rulership. This was the first time it had ever collapsed. The young man looked at the collapsing gate and then coolly said, "For the sake of your father, Senior Meng, I won't go too hard on you. Go ahead and vent your anger, but it will only be just this once." The young man waved his sleeve, and everything in the world began to grow blurry, and everyone began to disappear. Before she completely disappeared, the beautiful woman's voice rang out throughout the entire world, filled with determination and staunchness. "I will issue a warning too," she said, "and it had better be just this once. Earlier she was called Madame Fang, and here she is called Meng Li. In Chinese culture, women don't change their name upon marriage. However, they can be addressed with their husband's surname if used with the right title. In Chinese, her name is Chinese letter Meng Lai. Meng is a surname, the same as Meng Hao's. Li means beautiful. Chapter 427, Greenwood Tree Ancestor Awakening. "It doesn't matter whether we're talking about family love or one's temper," the young man said lightly. He smiled slightly. "Everything is karma. Sooner or later, everything becomes empty after it has been severed and annihilated." With that, he waved his right hand. Time almost seemed to flow in reverse as the crumbled South Heaven Gate instantly reformed, as good as new. Of course, the young man knew that, although the gate itself could be repaired, its collapse earlier had caused harm to the cultivation bases of all living Jai clan cultivators connected to it. Such losses would not be easily recovered. That was the true importance of this gate. It allowed all cultivators who were part of the Jai clan to utilize power of the heavens of Jai to achieve cultivation-based breakthroughs. Meanwhile, back in the Western Desert, outside of the Crow Divinity Holy Land, The stillness which had gripped the world was gone. Because of the failure of the karmic severed, the members of the 5 great tribes once again had their memories of Meng Hao. However, they were left with no sense whatsoever regarding the stillness. The last thing they remembered was Meng Hao suddenly flying up through the shining golden doors. The Crow Scout tribe greatfather shook his head and laughed heartily. Grandmaster Meng is being a bit hasty, but there's no harm in that. Let's go meet up. With that, his body flickered and he entered the glowing golden doors. He was followed by the priest, the Grand Elder and the others, including the man-form Outlander Beast. The large man's face was grim, and his eyes flickered with rage and humiliation. At the moment, the parrot was the dominant one. It remembered everything that had happened and understood the truth. This caused its fury to billow up as it urgently entered into the golden light. As for the rest of the tribes, they didn't care a bit whether Grandmaster Meng barged in, nor did they say anything. In fact, were they in the place of the Crow Scout tribe, they would do nothing about the matter. After all, Grandmaster Meng had displayed the power of a Grand Dragoneer. A person like that would be treated like an esteemed guest in any tribe. The members of the Crow Scout tribe passed through the golden doors and entered the Holy Land with the 7 volcanoes. By this time, Meng Hao had Jai 19 thoroughly bound up. The 4 wooden swords were continuously crippling his cultivation base, making it impossible for him to recover. In fact, out of fear that his cultivation base would rise too high, Meng Hao decided to use some additional methods. From within his bag of holding, he retrieved a large collection of poison pills that he had concocted. The power of these poisons was terrifying, not to mention any possible interactions they might have later. Meng Hao knew that even he himself would have a difficult time dispelling them. Without hesitation, he fed them to Jai 19. Jai 19's eyes went wide as he was forced to consume the vast quantities of poison pills. His face turned purple, and 7 tremors ran through his body. With each tremor, he withered a bit, until his very aura seemed to ooze with poison. His eyes were green and filled with terror. "You, damn it, how many poison pills do you have? How many did you give me?" Meng Hao snorted coldly. "We will end your torment for today. Once the poisons are fully fused into your body, I'll concoct some more for you." With that, Meng Hao waved his hand, wrapping Jai 19 up in the flag of 3 streamers and sucking him into the blood-colored mask. Only binding him in such a way allowed Meng Hao to set his mind at ease. Otherwise, how could he feel safe, considering Jai 19's incredible power? Once he's weak enough, I can use his blood to make a blood spirit. Also, I can use his soul to make a soul of lightning, just like the Li clan patriarch. If I can use some special methods, I can turn his body into a puppet. A high-level expert like him is a treasure through and through. I can't waste any part of him. The sad thing is, he didn't have a bag of holding. After a long moment of consideration, he came to the conclusion that he truly hadn't wasted any opportunities. Finally, he nodded in satisfaction. It was a good thing Jai 19 didn't hear the conclusions he had reached. Otherwise, blood would spray from his mouth, as he realized that being killed by Shui Dongliu would have been much better. This time I really did profit from misfortune. He looked down at his bag of the cosmos, and his heart began to twitch with excitement. On the way here, he had taken advantage of the power of the fishing line to collect a huge assortment of ferocious neodemons. There were some that, normally speaking, he would have had great difficulty in acquiring on his own. That was especially true regarding some of the hordes he had acquired. In his opinion, he really had profited wildly. And then there's the sword. He started breathing heavily as he thought of his 4th sword, which was currently stuck into Jai 19. Technically speaking, it was the 3rd he had found. Meng Hao now knew that the swords must contain some incredible mystery. If he could somehow acquire more of them, he would probably be able to solve the puzzle. Immortal murdering sword, huh? And then there's the flag of 3 streamers. Jai 19 called it a much different name than the meat jelly did. The Mountain and Sea Emperor's banner. After more thought, Meng Hao slapped his bag of holding to produce a green fishing pole. Hefting it in his hand, his eyes began to shine with a bright glow. When Jai 19 launched his karmic severing, he used a fishing line. I'm guessing that the fishing pole he used was the same type as this one. He looked thoughtfully at the fishing pole. All of a sudden, the same cacophony of life he had heard before once again began to sound out in his mind. There were babies crying, old people gasping for breath, men and women laughing and arguing. He quickly released his grip on the fishing pole. His eyes flickered as he muttered to himself for a moment, then put the fishing pole back into his bag of holding. I wonder how you use the thing. Maybe I can get the answer from Jai 19. Meng Hao glanced at the mouth of the volcano and then looked at the pool of destiny. His heart suddenly quivered. Earlier, he had stepped into the pool because of the karma line. As such, he hadn't noticed anything too extraordinary about it. Now, his eyes glittered as he once again shot back to enter the pool. Once inside, he closed his eyes for a long moment. When they opened, they were filled with excitement. So it contains totemic transmogrification powers. If I cultivate here, my greenwood tree totem will grow even stronger. With enough power, I should even be able to transmogrify the totem itself. It should even provide benefits to the eyeless larva. It should be able to make it into something like a true totem. I won't need Li Tao's magic to cover it up. Meng Hao's eyes glittered brightly. The wood-type greenwood tree totem was a legacy handed down to him from ancestor Greenwood of the Crow Scout tribe. Meng Hao wasn't sure what it would turn into if he transmogrified it further. He stood there thoughtfully for a moment, his eyes filling with determination. Then he sat down cross-legged in the waters to meditate. When he closed his eyes, the greenwood tree totem tattoo on his forehead and the eyeless larva totem tattoo on his hand immediately appeared. The waters in the pool began to seethe as if they were boiling. A whirlpool formed, with Meng Hao at the center and the water rushing around him. Within the pool, waters surged totemic power. As it circled around him, it fused into Meng Hao's body and then into the greenwood tree totem and the eyeless larva totem. After the fusion began, the pool waters were clearly lessening. Moments later, mist began to rise up from the seething water. The mist rose up to surround Meng Hao and then fill the entire inner part of the volcano. At the same time that Meng Hao was performing the fusion, the group from the Crow Scout tribe was cautiously making its way through the region outside. The Great Father, the Sky Priest, and the Grand Elder all looked suspicious as they traveled through the Holy Land. Things weren't exactly the way they remembered from previous occasions. Everything seemed much emptier. How strange. I remember last time there was a flock of crow neo-demons in this area. By using a special method, there was a high chance of acquiring a few of them. Yeah, that's right. And I remember that over there was a group of green mosquito neo-demons, completely fearsome in appearance. That year, the group I was leading happened to see someone from the Crow Fighter tribe accidentally provoke them. He was drained up and turned into a withered corpse in the blink of an eye. Weird, it's much quieter than usual in here this time. They encountered almost no neo-demons during their entire way, nor did they need to use any of the ancestral techniques. They simply flew directly toward the centermost of the 7 volcanoes. According to the tribe records, the center volcano housed the primary pool. If the water in the pool of destiny in the center volcano was reduced, then the water in pools in the other volcanoes would also be reduced. As soon as the Crow Scout tribe members neared the volcano mouth, they saw the mist within in. They also heard a growling roar coming from within. It was none other than the voice of Meng Hao. His long cry echoed out as the image of an enormous greenwood tree suddenly emerged from within the mist. At the same time, the mist in the volcano began to shrink down, absorbed. Soon, the image of Meng Hao became visible, seated cross-legged within the pool, sucking in all of the mist. The image of the greenwood tree existed directly above him. "It's Grandmaster Meng," cried the members of the Crow Scout tribe, instantly recognizing him. Their hearts trembled as Meng Hao's eyes suddenly opened. He took a deep breath, and the waters around him lessened further. Wisps of white chi rose up to be absorbed by Meng Hao and the greenwood tree image, causing the tree to become even more lifelike as if it really existed there. It was at this point that rumbling sounds could be heard from the other 6 volcanoes. White chi rose up from them and shot toward the region of the Crow Scout tribe members. It shot into the volcano mouth and directly toward Meng Hao. The greenwood tree above him suddenly began to shake, and it expanded outward. Its bark began to look older and older, as if years were passing. It seemed as if at this moment the tree was growing so high it could reach the heavens. In fact, to anyone observing, it seemed the tree wasn't just growing. The ancient scars and marks on the tree's surface seemed to be naturally occurring. This indicated that the greenwood tree. The Sky Priest gasped. "Ancestral awakening," she said faintly. "Grandmaster Meng's greenwood tree totem is experiencing an ancestral awakening." "Greenwood tree ancestral awakening," cried the Great Father, shocked. He began panting, his eyes wide. Down inside the pool waters, Meng Hao's eyes snapped open again. Even he had never imagined that by absorbing the totemic power of the pool and fusing it into the greenwood tree totem would actually give birth to the power of ancestral awakening. Meng Hao was astonished. What will be awakened in the end? An ancient greenwood tree. This chapter was sponsored by Von Neumann, Henry Tizard, and Nikos Theodoro. Chapter 428, A World That Supersedes. Or perhaps it will turn into the tree that emerged from within the ninth sea all those years ago and crossed the stars to planet South Heaven, the supreme greenwood tree. Meng Hao's eyes glittered as the chi continued to rush into him. Outside, the other 6 volcanoes were rumbling as white mist continued to shoot out toward Meng Hao. The more chi he absorbed, the brighter his eyes grew. He looked up at the enormous greenwood tree floating in midair above him, which emanated a boundless green glow. It dyed the sky, covered the land, filling everything with the aura of the greenwood tree. Throughout the Crow Divinity Holy Land, all of the plants and vegetation were writhing. The members of the Crow Scout tribe panted as they stared at the scene. Meanwhile, outside of the Holy Land, back in the region of the Crow Scout tribe, the enormous tree looked over at the green glow rising up to the heavens. "Wood," it said softly. Even the members of the other 4 tribes who were waiting outside of the golden doors were filled with shock. Although they couldn't see clearly everything that was happening inside, they were filled with a sense of baffling wonderment. Each and every one had faces filled with shock. At the same time, the various totemic sacred ancients atop the mountains of the other 4 tribes appeared. They stared toward the Crow Divinity Holy Land, and one by one all uttered the same word. "Wood." Even as this word filled the air, the plants and vegetation in the surrounding mountain ranges were whipping about wildly, despite the fact that there was no wind. They flickered, emitting rustling sounds that seemed to form voices of submission. It was as if they were offering obeisance to the sovereign of all wood-type entities. The 4 bizarre life forms from the other 4 tribes slowly bowed, as if in salute to the miracle which was occurring. As they were saluting, the members of the Crow Scout tribe back in the Crow Divinity Holy Land actually stopped breathing momentarily. They watched as the gigantic greenwood tree rapidly began to shrink in size. The smaller it got, the more intense was the green light it emitted. By the time it shrank to 300 meters in height, it was like a green sun, filling everything around it with intense green light. Meng Hao breathed deeply as he watched the greenwood tree shrinking. 300 meters, 150, 100, until it was 30 meters. 15, 10, 3, half a meter, 1/3, 3 inches, 2 inches. It seemed to be shrinking in correlation to the reduction of water in the pool. Massive amounts of mist were absorbed by Meng Hao. In the blink of an eye, the greenwood tree was only 1 inch tall. The light it emitted was so bright that it penetrated out of the Crow Divinity Holy Land. The plants and vegetation outside which were groveling in reverence, the 5 saluting life forms, and all of the cultivators who had wood-type totems, felt a profound impulse to prostrate themselves in worship. Back within the Crow Divinity Holy Land, the 1-inch tall, brightly glowing greenwood tree in front of Meng Hao shot toward him, branding onto his forehead. A massive roaring noise filled the air, and green light shot out in all directions. As soon as everyone was able to see again, they looked at Meng Hao's forehead and saw a type of totem that no one had ever seen before. This totem tattoo was of a single ancient character. Wood 1. As you might be aware, Chinese characters go back for thousands of years. According to my research, the type of ancient character mentioned to by Zhen here refer to the most ancient of Chinese characters. The ancient character for wood looks like this. It's quite a bit different from the modern version which looks like this, Chinese letter. There was no green tree, no picture, no resplendent glow. It was smooth and ordinary, a single ancient character, wood. However, this character wood represented everything wood type under heaven. Because of this, it didn't need some picture representation of a plant or tree because it was the essence of wood. All wood types in heaven and earth. Everything shook as all plants and vegetation bowed in worship. All such living things paid respect. Wood. Meng Hao floated up out from within the pool of destiny, the wood character on his forehead glittering with green light. He suddenly had the sensation that he could communicate with all plant forms in the world. He had the intense feeling that by merely exercising his will, he could magically manifest any type of wood. He also felt a type of calling from the pool of destiny beneath him. The pool had always borne the semblance of a pool, but when Meng Hao looked down at it, what he saw was a path. The call originated from the end of the path, where Meng Hao had the strange sensation that there existed a heavenly wood character. His eyes flickered thoughtfully, and then his body flashed. The Crow Scout tribe watched panting as he suddenly shot back down toward the pool of destiny, toward the path. Then he completely disappeared. It wasn't until Meng Hao disappeared that the Crow Scout tribe members finally reacted. In fact, it was the man-form outlander beast who did so first. Eyes wide, He looked at the scant amount of water left in the pool of destiny, and then let out a roar and charged toward the water. The Great Father's face flickered. He waved his hand, indicating for the others to follow as he headed toward the pool of destiny. There was already very little water left, but even absorbing a bit would be very beneficial. Almost at the same time that the Crow Scout tribe members were charging toward the pool of destiny, the faces of the members of the 4 tribes on the outside flickered. This was especially so when they noticed that the golden doors were growing dim. The 4 Great Fathers and the priests looked shocked. How could it be happening so quickly? Damn it, the pool of destiny is going to disappear. The golden light is fading. That means the waters in the pool of destiny are already running out. As of now, the Great Fathers and priests of the 4 tribes did not feel it necessary to abide by the previous agreement. They immediately began to lead their various tribe members toward the golden light. In an instant, more than 100 colorful beams of light shot through the doors. Within the Crow Divinity Holy Land, the members of the 4 tribes scattered, heading in the direction of the various volcanoes. Everything was quite chaotic. However, amidst the chaos, there were 4 people who happened to have a special means of communication. Suddenly, they all began to whistle through the air toward the 7th volcano. These 4 people were none other than Yan Song and the other nascent soul eccentrics. They moved with great speed, but cautiously, so as not to make themselves stand out. They entered the volcano and looked around, killing intent flickering in their eyes as they immediately attacked the other tribe members who had entered the volcano at the same time. Considering the level of their cultivation bases, and the fact that the tribe members were caught unawares, it only took the space of a few breaths before they wiped them out. There wasn't even time for miserable cries to ring out. Now that they didn't have to conceal their identities anymore, the 4 of them revealed their true appearances. The reek of blood filled the air, but Li Tian waved his hand, causing it to disappear instantly. At the same time, Mo Li and Old Devil Wang performed double-handed incantations. In the blink of an eye, a magical shield covered over everything, making it impossible for anyone else to enter the volcano. I have the feeling that Grandmaster Meng is none other than our fellow Taoist Meng, said Yan Song coolly, looking at the others. He was the first to enter this place, said Li Tian, frowning. He must definitely have picked up on some clues already. We need to move faster. According to my understanding, said Yan Song, this 7th volcano has the weakest restrictive spells. May I prevail upon you fellow Taoists to break the spells. Then we will be able to enter the location of the ancient Tao of alchemy. The 4 exchanged glances, then rushed down to the bottom of the volcano. According to the previous arrangement, Mo and Wang began to use their magical techniques to break down the restrictive spells. As the party of 4 got to work, the rest of the 5 tribes were struggling over the pools of destiny. Even as the man-form version of the Outlander beast, Parrot and Meat Jelly was absorbing the waters, Meng Hao magically appeared in a world that seemed to supersede anything that even remotely resembled it. The instant he appeared, he looked around, stunned. His eyes began to shine. Shockingly, he was in exactly the same place he had been before. He was in the same volcano he had just left. The water beneath his feet was none other than that of the pool of destiny. However, the waters were murky and impossible to absorb. Everything around him seemed tinged with gray, as if that were the only color that existed in this world. Meng Hao's eyes flickered as he loped around for a moment and then flew up toward the mouth of the volcano. Outside, everything looked the same. There were still 7 volcanoes. The land and the forests, everything looked just exactly the same as the Crow Divinity Holy Land. Except, located in the middle of the 7 volcanoes was a gigantic tree. This enormous, ancient tree towered up so high that it seemed as if it were supporting the very heaven, and it was golden. If you looked closely, the tree was not made from wood, but rather metal. At the very top of the tree was a gigantic golden crow, standing there, staring at Meng Hao. 2. The golden crow is a Chinese mythological creature related to the sun. You can see some various artistic depictions here. At the bottom of the tree was a corpse, leaning up against the tree and facing a decrepit pill furnace. There was no one and nothing else in the area, only the great tree and the golden crow. No lives were present, nor any life force, nor any presence of death. Everything was quiet, so quiet that many people would find it terrifying. Meng Hao focused on the great tree and the golden crow. Then he looked at the corpse and the pill furnace. Were it not for the corpse and the pill furnace, Meng Hao would have come to the conclusion that everything Yan Song said was incorrect. Thoughtfully, Meng Hao flew forward toward the great golden tree. As he neared, the golden crow atop the tree suddenly moved its head. A golden gleam could be seen in its eyes. Meng Hao stopped and stood stock still. He could sense that it was the golden tree upon which the golden crow stood that was calling him. The golden crow glanced at Meng Hao, then closed its eyes. Meng Hao clasped hands in a bow and then neared it. He didn't examine the great tree first. Instead, he looked down at the corpse. There in the corpse's hand was a jade slip. Meng Hao picked it up and scanned it with spiritual sense. 3 characters suddenly appeared in his head. Spirit-severing pill. His eyes glittered as he looked down at the pill furnace. As soon as he did, a strange expression could be seen on his face. There on the back of the furnace was a large hole. Within the pill furnace, no medicinal pill could be seen. However, even though countless years had passed, as a grandmaster of the Tao of Alchemy, Meng Hao could tell from the residue left behind that before being destroyed, there had indeed been a medicinal pill inside. Looking at the hole, he suddenly had the sense that whatever pill had been concocted inside in ancient times had burst out of its own accord. It definitely is of the ancient Tao of Alchemy, something from primordial times, but where did the pill go? Chapter 429, The Golden Crow and the Great Tree. Meng Hao looked around, muttering to himself. He then scanned the area with spiritual sense. However, other than the golden tree and the golden crow, there was no trace of anything else. Could it have left this place entirely? Thought Meng Hao. As a grandmaster of the Tao of Alchemy, he had concocted sentient medicinal pills before, the kind that attempted to wrest away good fortune from heaven and earth, the type that the heavens attempted to destroy with tribulation. Lost in thought, Meng Hao considered how most such ancient medicinal pills had withered up long ago, and were no doubt nothing more than dust. Most likely it already shriveled away into ashes. Meng Hao couldn't imagine how a pill that could break out of the furnace in such a manner could possibly still exist after so many years had passed. He put the matter aside and turned his head to look at the great tree. After a long moment, he reached out his hand and placed it softly on the surface of the tree. The instant he touched it, it began to vibrate and slowly emit a golden light. At the same time, the wood totem tattoo on Meng Hao's forehead began to emit a green light. There was no communication or interaction. Instead, there was a sliver of will that had existed for who knew how long in this great tree that, at this moment, was set free. It had encountered something similar to itself that it approved of, and had decided to say its final goodbyes. Meng Hao looked at the tree and could see that it no longer had any life force left in it. The only thing that remained were the traces of the passage of time. After a long moment passed, Meng Hao sighed. So this is the place that Yan Song and the others are dying to get to. No medicinal pill, only a corpse and the remains of a great tree. Even the pill formula in the jade slip is of ancient times. Nowadays, you wouldn't even be able to find the right medicinal plants. The only thing here worth looking at is that golden crow. Meng Hao looked up at the bird sitting on top of the tree overhead. Finally, he shook his head and was about to pull back his hand, when suddenly a tremor ran through his body. The previously closed eyes of the golden crow snapped open. Powerful life force streamed out, entering into the great tree. Suddenly, power seemed to emanate out from the tree as if it was still alive. Because Meng Hao's hand was touching the tree, he was able to sense the power of the life force. In that instant, his eyes went wide with disbelief. He looked up again at the golden crow, his mind blank. It was an ancient sacred relic of the crow divinity tribe, something that had existed for many years and was powerful enough to give birth to an entire tribe. Nowadays, that once powerful tribe was fading away and had already begun to split apart. This life force, Meng Hao was struck dumbfounded for a long moment. Finally, he took a deep breath. As a grandmaster of the Tao of Alchemy, he was very familiar with medicinal pills. Just now, he could tell that the life force emanating from the golden crow actually contained the aura of a medicinal pill. It was not emanating life force, but rather the power of a medicinal pill. Is it because it consumed the medicinal pill, or is it the medicinal pill? The possibility of the latter sent Meng Hao's mind and heart reeling. Before coming to this place, he could never have imagined that the golden crow of this once powerful tribe originated from what had started out as a medicinal pill. He was a grandmaster of the Tao of Alchemy, and as such, could accept that lakes and mountains could become demons. However, perhaps his own deep knowledge of alchemy covered over his own eyes in a way that made it impossible for him to conceive of the same thing happening with medicinal pills. He began to breathe heavily. He was now almost certain that of the 2 different possibilities he had just considered, it was virtually impossible for the first one to be correct. After consuming a medicinal pill, its aura could not exist for a very long time. The only correct conclusion was that the medicinal pill had turned into a demon, which then could exist forever. Panting, Meng Hao looked up at the golden crow and the great tree. Suddenly, an image appeared in his mind. Within the image was an ancient grandmaster of the Tao of alchemy, sitting beneath a greenwood tree, preparing to pass away in meditation. As death neared, he produced the most glorious pill he had ever concocted. Unfortunately, by the time the pill emerged, the grandmaster had already breathed his last breath. Years later, when the sentience of the pill reached a certain point, it suddenly broke out of the pill furnace. It seemed as if this action might even have had something to do with the greenwood tree. From the moment it appeared in the world, its only friend and partner was none other than the greenwood tree. Year after year passed. After the passage of an innumerable amount of time, when the pill had matured and risen to prominence, it founded the Crow divinity tribe. Many more years passed. Eventually, the greenwood tree's life began to waste away, and it died. The medicinal pill could not accept that the tree had perished. It used its powers to transform its color, and every so often, it would sacrifice some of its own life force to feed the tree. However, the tree truly had perished. Regardless of what was done, the only thing that could be brought back was something empty, lifelike though it might seem. Even still, although the medicinal pill understood this, it refused to give up. Meng Hao considered all of this for a long moment, and then let out a soft sigh. His hand dropped to his side as he stepped back a few paces. He clasped his hands and bowed deeply to the great tree and the golden crow. He could see that the golden crow was currently growing weaker and weaker. Soon, its life force would be exhausted, and it would transform into dust on the wind. When that happened, the great tree would have nothing to support its empty but lifelike existence, and it too would transform into dust. Perhaps both of them were simply waiting for that moment when they both turned into dust together, and could drift up into the empty sky. Meng Hao looked at the golden crow and the great tree. He wasn't sure why, but for some reason the look in the eyes of the golden crow reminded him of certain aspects of Grandmaster Pill Demon. The crow stood atop the great tree. Pill Demon stood on his short mountain. The crow gazed upon the tree. Pill Demon gazed upon the statue of Violet East. It was a strange feeling that caused Meng Hao to stand there thoughtfully for a moment before sighing. Since I'm here, I might as well employ some of my power. He lifted his right hand into the air and performed an incantation. Then, he took a deep breath and pointed at the tree. By my command as the 9th-generation demon sealer, I bequeath you with righteous bestowal. Immediately, a tremor ran through Meng Hao's body, and he spat out a mouthful of blood. When it landed on the tree, a strange light began to glow in the golden crow's eyes, and it stared at Meng Hao. Righteous bestowal causes your path to become that of a demon. Righteous bestowal causes your Tao to become unceasing. Righteous bestowal causes your spirit to return from emptiness to become a demon. My approval represents the approval of the League of Demon Sealers. This is righteous bestowal, a true blessing. Such was the true usage of righteous bestowal. After being enlightened regarding it, Meng Hao had never truly used its full power on any demon. At the most, he had used only some of its bestowing power. Righteous bestowal was a type of approval. Any demon of heaven and earth that received the approval of a demon sealer would be able to temporarily absorb some of the essence of the 9th mountain and sea. Even if that demon were dead, its soul would not disperse. This golden crow had not done any favors for Meng Hao. However, its emotions and thoughts had stirred Meng Hao. They touched him in a way that made him believe that providing assistance with righteous bestowal was the right thing to do. After the power of righteous bestowal was manifested, Meng Hao took a deep breath. He looked at the great tree and the golden crow and then turned to leave. It was at this point that the golden crow suddenly emitted a sound. This was the first sound it had made since Meng Hao entered this place, a shrill cry. This cry sounded something like the grating of metal against metal. Meng Hao looked back to see the golden crow shaking. As it shook, ghost images sprung up, and a golden light surged out. The light slammed into Meng Hao's torso, transforming into a gold-colored brand. It was a totem tattoo that was somewhat similar to his previous totem tattoo of the greenwood tree, an image of a golden crow. This was a metal-type totem, which, if Meng Hao was lucky and could accomplish an ancestral awakening, might eventually turn into the ancient character for metal. After sending out the totem, the golden crow seemed to have been weakened by at least half. Its body shook on the verge of collapse for a moment before it collected itself, and then looked at Meng Hao. Meng Hao opened his mouth to say something, although he wasn't sure what. However, it was at this exact moment that, within this world of grayness, a boom echoed out from the mouth of the seventh volcano. 4 figures suddenly became visible. Haha, we're here. This chapter was sponsored by Jonas Grundstrom. Chapter 430, Battling the Nascent Soul State. The booming sound echoed out through the air as 4 figures shot out from the mouth of the seventh volcano. In the lead was a man wearing a long white robe. His hair whipped about him, and his eyes flickered as if with lightning. His expression was one of excitement. This was none other than Yan Song. Behind Yan Song was Li Tian, whose eyes shone brightly with vigilance. He whistled through the air like a black dragon, his black robe flapping in the wind. He really did look like a dragon. The sight was incredibly imposing. Behind him were Mo Li and eccentric Wang. When the 4 of them appeared, they were instantly filled with interest regarding this gray world. The next thing they saw was the great tree, plus Meng Hao and the corpse beneath it. What caught their attention more than anything else, though, was the pill furnace. "So it is here," said Yan Song, his eyes flickering with coldness. Next to him, Li Tian's eyes were grim as he hovered in midair and stared at Meng Hao. Mo and Wang also floated in midair, glancing around with flickering eyes. After seeing that Meng Hao was the only person present here, their eyes filled with a strange light. "Fellow Taoist Meng, you're so fast," said Li Tian, laughing mirthlessly. "You're not wearing your mask today, but we're all old friends, right? There's no need for any disguises. You beat us here, which is well and good, but according to our previous agreement, please produce whatever treasures you've acquired. It's time to split our shares." As he spoke, he moved forward toward Meng Hao. Yan Song, Mo and Wang also neared, surrounding Meng Hao. Meng Hao frowned as he looked at the approaching nascent soul eccentrics. His face grew dark and he let out a cold harumph, then suddenly kicked out with his right foot, sending the pill furnace flying into the air. The instant his foot began to move, Li Tian's right hand shot up and he pointed at Meng Hao. "Fellow Taoist Meng, what are you doing?" A black blur shot out from his finger. As it flew out into the air, it transformed into a rotating black flower with 5 petals. Each petal of the flower looked like a sinister face. They emitted mournful cries as they shot toward Meng Hao. Meng Hao waved his right hand. A bloody light erupted up as the air in front of him turned the color of blood and a massive hand appeared. It instantly shot toward the black flower, slamming into it. A massive explosion ensued. As the sound of the explosion rippled out, Meng Hao retreated backward. Yan Song and the others continued to approach. It was at this time that Meng Hao finally spoke. "Fellow Taoist Li, I would like to ask you a question. What exactly are you doing? Why don't the lot of you go look at that pill furnace?" He flicked his sleeve, his expression grim. Having heard his words, Yan Song and the others suddenly stopped moving. Li Tian's eyes narrowed and came to fall on the pill furnace. The others looked over as well and instantly saw the hole in it. The hole was obviously not recently made. Yan Song and the others were all wily old foxes, and it only took a glance for them to realize that the hole had been created long, long ago, not recently. "This is..." The 4 of them frowned and breathed with seeming difficulty. Meng Hao's expression was one of extreme displeasure, even rage. "I haven't been here for long. After coming to this tree, I saw only this corpse in that damaged pill furnace." He had noticed earlier that the weakened golden crow had long since concealed itself atop the tree. Even if you looked closely, you wouldn't be able to see it. "If I said I didn't find anything, you wouldn't believe me. Well, I did find something." Laughing coldly, he lifted his right hand up to reveal a jade slip. As everyone watched, he took out another jade slip, a white one, and then branded the information from the first one onto it. After that, he threw the first jade slip out in front of him. Yan Song caught it, then looked at it with furrowed brow. He then handed it to Li Tian and the others, who also examined it and began to frown. They should be able to tell at a glance whether the jade slip was real or a fake. But even Yan Song, an expert in the Tao of alchemy, was unfamiliar with most of the ancient medicinal plants listed therein. Meng Hao's face was dark, even filled with rage. His wording sharp, he said, "You want to cause a big fuss over a single jade slip. How disappointing. I'll take my leave now. From now on, my path is not connected to any of you." His awe-inspiring display and sharp words left Yan Song and the others incapable of offering any sort of response. Meng Hao gave a cold snort. Then, his body flickered as he turned into a beam of colorful light and shot off into the distance. Before he could get very far, Li Tian suddenly disappeared. When he reappeared, he was directly in front of Meng Hao. "Fellow Taoist Meng, Why are you in such a hurry to leave? Exactly what else did you acquire? Don't expect that a few trite words will convince us that you didn't take the medicinal pill that burst out of that pill furnace. Meng Hao stopped. Now his expression was no longer grim but calm. His eyes were ice cold as he looked at Li Tian. Well, fellow Taoist Li, what brilliant opinion do you have? I won't dare to use the word brilliant, fellow Taoist Meng, he replied slowly, staring Meng Hao in the eye. But since you got here before us, it will be difficult for you to avoid suspicions. Just hand over your bag of holding and let us search it. That should be enough. Meng Hao looked back at him, then started to chuckle. His chuckle turned into uproarious laughter that eventually began ripples that shook everything in the area. Li Tian's face flickered. Yan Song and the others suddenly looked very serious. You want to search my bag of holding? Li Tian, have you suddenly reached the spirit severing stage? Killing intent blazed within Meng Hao's eyes. He began to lift his right hand, but even as he did, Li Tian flashed an incantation gesture with both hands and then shoved them forward. As he shoved his hands forward, a black mist surged up, which then transformed into a long black spear. Rumbling filled the air as the spear shot toward Meng Hao. It moved with incredible speed, but even as it neared Meng Hao, the wood totem tattoo on his forehead glittered. Suddenly, an enormous wood character appeared in front of him. Simultaneously, boundless wood-type aura erupted out. Instantly, the approaching spear began to shake. Rumbling filled the air as Meng Hao's body shot backward at high speed. His left hand slapped his bag of holding, and wooden time swords flew out to form the lotus sword formation. The formation rotated in midair, its appearance like that of an enormous lotus. This formation embodied both the shape and the will of a lotus. In addition, it contained the natural properties of intelligence embodied by a lotus, something that Meng Hao had come to gain enlightenment regarding throughout his years of observing lotuses. Propelled by the power of the wooden time swords, the glowing, 10-meter-wide lotus shot through the air toward Li Tian, rumbling the entire way. Time, said Meng Hao softly, his expression cold. Immediately, the shocking power of time emanated out toward Li Tian. Li Tian's face fell as he suddenly sensed his body growing older. Everything within the region of the lotus experienced the passing of time. Everything seemed to be moving faster than the world around it. In the blink of an eye, an entire 60-year cycle was gone. Li Tian had never encountered any magical technique like this before. His face flickered, and he flashed an incantation gesture with his right hand. As he waved his hand, black light poured out from his body to resist the wooden time swords. He performed a minor teleportation, reappearing several hundred meters away. Even as he tried to flee, Meng Hao's eyes flashed with killing intent. He took a step forward and then utilized the bloodburst flash. Moving such a short distance made it seem almost like he had used minor teleportation, and he was suddenly directly in front of Li Tian. His right hand clenched into a fist and he punched out. A boom echoed out. Li Tian's face fell and he spit out a mouthful of nascent soul aura. The brightly colorful aura transformed in midair into the image of a small person that looked exactly like Li Tian. The figure let out a sharp cry as it shot toward Meng Hao. Boom! Meng Hao's body trembled as he retreated 7 or 8 paces, his face ashen. As for Li Tian, he retreated about 4 paces, his face flickering. His expression was one of ferocity, but fear glimmered within his eyes. Fellow Taoists Yan, Mo, and Wang, he said, what are you standing there watching for? If you're really willing to let this guy leave, then I'll hold back. Before Yan Song and the others could even react to Li Tian's words, Meng Hao laughed coldly and once again shot forward. It's too late to hold back now. 5 figures appeared around Meng Hao that looked identical to him. These were none other than Meng Hao's blood clones, each of which could wield an untold amount of Meng Hao's. Simultaneously, a golden glow sprang into being around Meng Hao. The full power of the great circle of the gold core exploded out. Up above Meng Hao's head appeared an ancient starry sky. Within this starfield magically appeared a shocking great greenwood tree. Meng Hao's cultivation base was at the great circle of the gold core stage. However, even with only the wood-type power he possessed, he could fight back against the early nascent soul stage. Now that he had acquired metal-type power as well, there was very little difference at all between him and the early nascent soul stage, although there were some divine abilities he could not employ. Moving forward rapidly, Meng Hao pointed out with his right index finger. The blood finger, blood palm, and blood death world, along with his starfield core chi and wood-type totem, all fueled the lotus sword formation. In the blink of an eye, its power was increased exponentially. It droned as it rotated through the air. At the same time, Meng Hao cried out, "Time!" This magic again, Li Tian's face flickered. Although his cultivation base was higher than Meng Hao's and he had more divine abilities at his disposal, there was little he could do when facing up against the magic of time. He didn't even dare to near it. His longevity was already nearing its end as it was. To him, this art was like death itself. Feeling his aura being ruined, he had no choice but to retreat. Seeing the rotating lotus sword formation about to fall, Yan Song and the others finally took action. They shot forward to appear near Li Tian. The mighty pressure of the cultivation bases of 4 nascent soul cultivators emanated out like a flash flood. "Fellow Taoist Li, fellow Taoist Meng, please let me say a word," said Yan Song, looking directly at Meng Hao. Meng Hao's expression was as calm as ever, but inwardly he heaved a sigh of relief. Even if he put on the blood-colored mask, he was no match for 4 nascent soul cultivators all at the same time. However, based on the current situation, he had no choice but to fill the others with misgivings by putting on the air of someone who others did not dare to provoke. "There's no harm in speaking your mind, fellow Taoist Yan," he said, his voice cold. Chapter 431, Prelude to Funeral. "I believe what you said to be true," Yan Song said quickly. Li Tian frowned. Mo and Wang's eyes flickered. "That's because the treasure is here, it hasn't gone anywhere." Meng Hao's expression was the same as ever, but his heart filled with vigilance. "If you're talking about the spirit-severing pill," said Li Tian grimly, "then where exactly is it?" "It will appear on its own," said Yan Song. He turned, eyes glowing with avarice, toward the great tree. He lifted his right hand, revealing a jade bottle. He crushed it. A black liquid emerged along with a rotting stench. Within the black liquid was a maggot-like bug roughly the size of a finger. Its segmented body wriggled. As soon as it emerged, it lifted its head and let out a shrill cry. It turned into a black streak that shot toward the top of the tree. The sight of the thing shooting toward the treetop caused Meng Hao's face to flicker. Suddenly, the sound of metal scraping against metal drifted from the top of the tree, along with billowing golden light. The weakened golden crow flew out to meet the black bug and prevent it from approaching the great tree. A rumbling filled the air as the golden crow opened its mouth. Golden light surrounded the black bug. It shrieked as it was submerged and crushed into ash. The golden crow's body flickered, clearly weakened further. Yet its eyes held sharpness and dignity as it glared around at everyone. Behind it was the great tree, which it would sacrifice anything to protect. "The legendary golden crow pill is real," said Yan Song, laughing. "After it was created that year, it acquired a spirit and transformed into a golden crow. At one time it had the chance to achieve immortal ascension, but chose instead to grow weak and use its life force to protect a dead tree." His eyes glittered with greed as he stared at the golden crow. Li Tian's eyes also glittered, completely ignoring Meng Hao now. His breath quickened as he stared at the golden crow, envisioning a spirit-severing pill from ancient times, something to arouse wild frenzy among countless cultivators. Mo and Wang's eyes also shone brightly. "It's been weakened to the nascent soul stage," said Li Tian, his tone now lacking its previous hostility. "Fellow Taoists, this is good fortune. Let's catch it quickly and divide it up. Don't let it escape." Laughing, he strode forward. Yan Song chuckled. "The pill won't flee, not with the tree here. Even though it's dead, the pill won't leave it." He too began to walk forward. Mo and Wang transformed into beams of light. All 4 converged on the golden crow. By now none of them paid any attention to Meng Hao. He stood distant, a complex expression on his face. He could leave and no one would stop him, yet he hesitated. Booming sounds filled the air as the 4 attacked the golden crow. It let out a metallic cry, transforming into a golden shield that enveloped itself in the great tree. The booming sounds came from the 4's attacks against the golden shield. Blow after blow caused it to shrink slowly. Exhaustion filled the golden crow's eyes. Its life force was too faint. It looked back at the great tree, profound longing in its gaze. More booms echoed as the shield shrank further, forcing the golden crow to retreat. The tree seemed to decay as well. Its life force faded, until it looked nothing but dead and dried up. "Look," called Yan Song. "The only thing it can do is protect the tree. Be careful, though. Logically speaking, the golden crow can't possibly be this weak. Something strange is going on." Booms continued to echo. Yet the 4 attackers had various thoughts and clearly weren't attacking with full strength, rather guarding their moves. They seemed to fear this golden crow. Such a bizarre spirit would no doubt counterattack before death, most likely with ferocity that could kill them. The golden crow looked at the withering tree and seemed to sigh. It flew to perch at its top, attempting to use its life force to restore it. Unfortunately, it lacked enough life force. Its actions caused the golden shield to weaken further. Its body trembled. Meng Hao's hands clenched into fists, blood veins appearing in his eyes. It's weak because of me, he thought. Otherwise Yan Song and the others could never force it down like this. If I leave, I'll be safe. But then I'd be letting myself down. He looked at the bird, dying yet still watching the great tree. Its medicinal pill aura waned. Again, he thought of his master. He wasn't sure why he'd thought of master a second time, but his eyes now filled with determination. There are some things that rationally you shouldn't do, but you still do them anyway. He lifted his head and slapped his bag of holding. The blood-colored mask appeared. He placed it on his face and immediately a bloody aura billowed out. A blood-colored mist roiled around Meng Hao, turning into a red sea. As the sea waters undulated, a shocking killing intent exploded from him. Without a face, a single word, flames of war unify. Meng Hao strode forward and lifted his right hand. Behind him, an enormous face appeared. Its closed eyes snapped open, its mouth opening as it uttered a soundless song of mourning. It shot toward Yan Song and the three others. Almost the instant the face began to fly forward, Yan Song and the others looked back. Considering that the shield was just about to burst, Li Tian's eyes instantly filled with coldness and killing intent. Are you looking to die? The group of four exchanged glances, and then began to unleash divine abilities toward Meng Hao. As the divine abilities shot forward, the face collapsed into pieces, incapable of resisting four nascent soul cultivators. But Meng Hao waved his right hand. The flag of three streamers unraveled from Jai 19's body. It unfurled behind Meng Hao, long and black. One of the streamers spread out. Old and dilapidated, it transformed into a massive black canopy that swept forward. The overwhelming aura caused the faces of Yan Song and the others to flicker. Li Tian's pupils constricted. Mo and Wang gasped in shock. All three instantly felt a deadly crisis. A massive rumbling filled the air as the black streamer shot forward. Blood sprayed from Yan Song's mouth as he tumbled backward, astonishment on his face. Li Tian's right arm was instantly torn to shreds. Blood spouted from his mouth as he retreated backward, pale and disbelieving. Mo and Wang let out blood-curdling shrieks as blood shot from their torsos. They slammed into each other, wounds healing immediately but faces drained of color. They retreated backward, staring at Meng Hao in shock. Thanks to the blood-colored mask, Meng Hao's cultivation base had climbed much higher. Now he could fully utilize the power of the first of the flag's three streamers. Though the attack hadn't slain any of the four, it was stunning enough to shake heaven and earth. It came at a price. Meng Hao's hair was white again. Yet because of the boundless life force from his wood character totem, he wasn't fundamentally injured. His face was pale, blood seeping from the corners of his mouth. Despite his injuries, Meng Hao stood with his back to the tree. Li Tian gritted his teeth against the pain of his lost arm. Wiping blood from his mouth, he grimly said, "Fellow Taoist Meng, you certainly have wild ambitions. You want to kill the four of us and take the medicinal pill." He had tried to face the attack head-on, earning this serious injury. "Fellow Taoist Meng, you're going against our agreement," growled old devil Wang, his eyes thick with killing intent. Yan Song looked thoughtfully at Meng Hao for a long moment before finally saying, "Fellow Taoist Meng, why are you doing this?" "This pill has already achieved demonic ascension and yearns for the great tree," said Meng Hao calmly. "Even if you consume it, it will do you no good. It has no medicinal strength left because it's not a medicinal pill anymore." "Pills are pills," said Yan Song gruffly. "And what's this talk of demons? At the most, it has a spirit. Fellow Taoist Meng, you're a grandmaster of the Tao of alchemy and have concocted many pills and consumed even more. Don't you understand? Pills will forever be nothing more than pills." Meng Hao was silent as he thought of Grandmaster Pill Demon a third time. The feeling from the Golden Crow felt increasingly like the same feeling from Pill Demon. "There are some things I hesitate to do, but after I do them I feel no regret." Meng Hao said these words in a hoarse voice. As they echoed around him, he offered no explanation. What Meng Hao didn't notice was that a strange light had appeared in the Golden Crow's eyes. A soft, warm look that hadn't been there before, not even when it gave Meng Hao the metal-type totem as repayment for his righteous bestowal. That act had been exchanged. The Golden Crow wanted no karma with anything but the great tree. Now, the warm glow in its eyes was entirely different. Suddenly it spoke. Its voice was that of a woman, ancient and gentle. "I can sense upon you the aura of a life force the same as mine. As for you and me, We have seen very different lives. Thank you for using righteous bestowal on the greenwood tree and for standing up for us. When I was born, the greenwood tree was here to keep me company. When I was happy, he was here. When I was confused, he was here. It doesn't matter if he dies, I will always be by his side this life or in the next life. When living, when dying, we will be together. That is my Tao. I will never become a false immortal who shall exist as long as the heavens exist. I will walk my own path. I will be myself. In 1,000 years, no one would be here to witness our funeral. Because of you, our time together has been reduced by 1,000 years. However, the greenwood tree and I are deeply grateful to have you here to observe our death. As for these other people, they can accompany us in death. As means of repayment, I will give you my golden life tattoo. This chapter was sponsored by Michael Harrison, Adrian Seeger, Espen Leonhardsen, Omar Herrera, and Brian Nguyen. Chapter 432, Because of Meeting You. As the golden crow's voice echoed out, an intense glow emanated from its body. The light was so bright that in this gray world, only golden radiance existed. Meng Hao turned to the crow's voice as the beam of light fused into the metal-type totem tattoo on his chest. Meng Hao's body trembled, locked in place and looking backward. A roaring filled his head as boundless, indescribable metal-type power surged into him. Now, the metal-type totem tattoo on his chest was experiencing the same type of transmogrification that the wood-type totem had. "This is my golden life tattoo," said the golden crow in its soft voice. "With it, you will forever be able to wield the complete power of metal." Yan Song and the others watched in astonishment. Suddenly, an unprecedented crisis exploded within them. Li Tian panted, pupils pinpoints. His life on the run had honed his keen intuition. Heart pounding, he burst into motion. He didn't move forward but fled toward the 7th volcano. Yan Song hesitated for a moment. Next to him, Mo and Wang exchanged a glance and then began to retreat. At this moment, a sigh came from the golden crow atop the tree. The golden glow vanished, as if retracted from the roots and condensing at the crown. As the golden light flowed upward, the tree's original color was revealed, gray, the color of death. All the golden light coalesced on the golden crow, now emanating a shocking glow. Within the golden light, the crow's body transformed. Soon it was a young woman in a long golden robe, her appearance youthful yet emanating an aura of ancientness. She stood at the crown of the tree, looking down with grief. "Ashes to ashes, dust to dust," she murmured. She stepped forward. As she moved, ripples spread through the air. Each step caused change. Everything turned to gold, even the sky seemed to solidify. The whole place became a world of metallic gold. Every part of this world, every life, all existence, became golden metal. Li Tian fled at top speed toward the 7th volcano's mouth, his face suddenly filled with terror. Though the woman moved slowly, she suddenly appeared before him. "You," Li Tian panted, pupils constricting. An intense crisis engulfed him. Without hesitation, he flashed an incantation sign. Magical items burst from his bag of holding. He shoved his hands out, summoning a black fog that emanated terrifying ripples. "If you're gonna die, then just die. You're not taking me with you," he roared. But even as his divine ability manifested and a shocking aura erupted, a golden hand shot through the air. It pierced the black mist, distorting the ripples. The hand appeared before Li Tian, a finger tapping lightly on his head. The woman turned to look at Meng Hao. Her voice soft, she said, "Remember, this is the first weed of my golden life tattoo. Convergence weed. Any life that I touch will turn into gold." Li Tian's entire body shook in response to her touch. Suddenly, a golden light began to emanate from his forehead. His eyes went wide as the light covered his entire body. His face distorted with terror, and then his entire body turned into a statue of gold. Even his nascent soul had no time to escape and was sealed within him. The metal-type power flowed into it, and it was transformed into a gold soul. All of this happened in an instant. The speed was so shocking that no one could react. In the blink of an eye, an awe-inspiring nascent soul eccentric, a person who could shake the world wherever he went, a top-notch expert. Disperse the aura, exterminate the chi, eliminate the body. A clattering sounded as the golden statue of Li Tian fell. It couldn't move, shock frozen on its face as it stared toward the withered tree. This turn of events sent thunderbolts through Yan Song, Mo, and Wang's hearts. Their faces fell. Yan Song's mind spinning, he shot backward. His hand slapped his bag, producing a command medallion that he crushed. Mo and Wang were surrounded by spell light, layer upon layer of brilliant radiance. It invoked a pulling power, ghost images springing around them as if they would shoot skyward at any moment. The entire time, Meng Hao stood there motionless as the metal-type power continued to roar into him. Within the golden light around him appeared a massive, lifelike golden crow. As the golden light flickered and the metal-type power flowed into him, Meng Hao sensed the transmogrification and the increase in his cultivation base. Then he saw Li Tian die and watched as Yan Song and the others made to flee. Silently, Meng Hao looked up into the sky. The woman's body looked blurry, as if she might disappear. The golden glow around her faded, and she didn't look at Yan Song and the others fleeing but gazed at Meng Hao. Next, my golden life tattoo second weird. I call it net of heaven. The woman thrust her hand down toward the ground. The golden ground quaked, cracks spreading. As the land broke apart, countless golden fragments flew into the air, transforming into a rain of gold that shot toward Mo and Wang. At the same time, the entire world except for Meng Hao's area and the tree collapsed. Rocks, plants, everything fell to pieces. These golden chunks coalesced into countless oddly shaped blades that spun to form a towering tempest. Caught in the tempest, Mo and Wang's faces filled with despair. The golden tempest had them trapped, ready to collapse. The two roared, going all out to activate their spell, causing the air to rumble. But no matter how they fought with their spell or cultivation power, they couldn't resist this massive golden tempest formed from the land itself. The giant golden tempest swept over them, the golden rain forming an unbreakable net. When it dissipated, only skeletal remains were left of Mo and Wang. Not far away, their nascent souls tried to flee, but they couldn't escape far enough and were destroyed by the tempest. Turn the world gold and collapse the land into a tempest. Use this power to form the net of heaven, which can exterminate all wills. There is a third weird called, if not a pill. The woman was very faint, as if about to disappear. Her graceful hand pointed at Yan Song, whose body was nearly transparent as he used a jade slip to escape. He screamed as a giant invisible hand wrenched him from the void. His transparent body became clear as he was pulled back into the golden world. His face was pale, eyes filled with madness. "If I'm going to die," he howled, "I will choose the way I perish." His body burst into flames, self-detonation power manifesting. A nascent soul's self-detonation unleashes immense power. But the instant he seemed about to detonate, the woman-formed golden crow softly said, "If not a pill." At the same time, she waved her hand, causing the golden shrapnel tempest to shoot toward Yan Song, where shockingly it formed into a gigantic pill furnace with Yan Song inside. Caught within the pill furnace, the force of Yan Song's self-detonation was not only blocked, but turned into transformative power. Meng Hao began to pant with shock. He could clearly see that within the pill furnace, the force of Yan Song's exploding body was turned into a vortex that spun rapidly within the pill furnace. Incredibly, it was transformed into a single, blood-colored medicinal pill. Concoct a person into a pill, be nostalgic of one's past, if not a pill. The pill furnace vanished, and the blood-colored medicinal pill flew over to land on the woman's hand. She looked down at it, then crushed it into ash. Her body was now clearly about to dissipate. She turned from Meng Hao, gazing at the withered tree as she walked to it. As she neared, her body faded with each step, her life force disappearing. The tree began to rot into dust. "Live together, die together," the woman murmured as her body disappeared. The tree had completely rotted into floating ash. Ashes to ashes, dust to dust. In that instant, everything in front of Meng Hao grew blurry. He was no longer locked in place, but could move once again. Suddenly, in the void in front of him, he saw a man wearing a long green robe. Next to him was a golden woman. They were smiling and laughing as they stepped out into the nothingness. "You are a pill and I am a tree. The year you appeared before me, my life became more than just greenness. I'm a pill and you are a tree. The year I opened my eyes for the first time, I saw you end. My life was no longer lonely." Sometimes, the meaning of an entire life can be only because of a chance meeting. His expression serious, Meng Hao clasped hands and bowed deeply toward the two departing figures. As he bowed, the golden light around him shrank down, and the golden world around him began to collapse. At the same time, the metal-type totem tattoo on his chest transformed into a character. Metal. Note from Urgen. Regardless of whether or not you're talking about love or friendship, many things in life happen because of a chance meeting. I've been very lucky in my path of writing to meet all of you. Thank you for your support, and thank you for willingness to meet me. Note from Deathblade, is Urgen awesome. In Chinese, the character used for metal in the five elements is the same as the character for gold. Chapter 433, Enemies Approach. When the metal-type totem tattoo reached its zenith, the ancient character for metal appeared. 1. The ancient character for metal in China looked like this. The character was branded onto Meng Hao's chest over his heart. His heartbeat made it undulate, emitting a golden glow like his gold core. In this instant, his cultivation base surged. He remained in the great circle of the gold core, but his true battle prowess now matched the nascent soul stage. When it came to the path of concocting a five-colored nascent soul, if you considered it to have 5 stages, then as of now, Meng Hao had completed 2. He took a deep breath as he looked up. The crumbling world of gold was now gone. He was back in the Crow Divinity Holy Land. Everything around him was colorful again. However, the entire place was now showing signs of collapse. Rumbling echoed through the air as the 7 volcanoes broke apart. The remaining neo-demons roared out of control. The shocked tribe members fled frantically. Meng Hao's sudden appearance went unnoticed. All cultivators flew toward the exit at top speed. Meng Hao joined the crowds, eyes glittering. Constant booms echoed as land crumbled and mountains fell. Lava erupted from the 7 volcanoes, black smoke and dust choking the sky. The ground quaked and neo-demons roared. Meng Hao flew at top speed along with the crowd. The Crow Divinity Holy Land seemed on the verge of complete destruction. When he reached the exit, his body grew blurry, and then he was outside of the great golden doors. The members of the 5 great tribes all wore looks of astonishment. The Crow Scout tribe Greatfather caught sight of Meng Hao. Sighing inwardly, he flew over. Rumbling sounded from within the golden glow as the great door shattered. At the same time, the golden light vanished. The 5 great tribes cried out in alarm. This sudden collapse shocked them completely. They were pale-faced and panic-stricken. The Holy Land collapsed. The Holy Land is gone. Our Crow Divinity Holy Land has fallen. Could it be some inauspicious portent? The 5 tribes, greatfathers and priests, had grim faces, their hearts uneasy. The Crow Scout tribe Greatfather's expression fell. He stopped approaching Meng Hao and went to confer with the other greatfathers and priests instead. Meng Hao floated in midair, staring thoughtfully at the fading golden glow. He thought of the Crow Divinity Holy Land, the Golden Crow, and the Great Tree. After a long moment, he sighed. As he sighed, the voice of the parrot suddenly sounded out next to him, as the man-form Outlander beast appeared. Damn it, that Jai clan guy tried to wipe out my memories again. Lord Fifth won't stand for it. I'm going to screw the heavens of Jai, screw the heavens. This had clearly become his new purpose. Meng Hao turned to look at the big man and frowned. Who exactly are you? The parrot, the meat jelly, or the Outlander beast? Obviously I'm Lord Fifth B\TCH, said the man, a conceited expression appearing on his face. Listen, Meng Hao, I'm issuing you a staunch warning. From now on, you're not allowed to call out Tai the Outlander beast. She's become my beloved concubine. From now on, you have to call her Lady Fifth. Seeing the look on the big man's face, Meng Hao glared at him and said, Screw off. You, I can't believe you dare to disrespect Lord Fifth. Even worse, you disrespect Lady Fifth. Don't tell me you want to steal her away from Lord Fifth. The parrot was furious at this conclusion. Even as the parrot's ire was provoked, the greatfathers and priests of the 5 great tribes split apart, their expressions serious. They made their way back toward their respective tribes, followed by the other tribe members. The Crow Scout tribe Greatfather and Sky Priest approached Meng Hao with bitter smiles. The Greatfather spoke first. The Crow Divinity Holy Land has collapsed and the ancestors' protection is gone. We can't cover this up. Other tribes will find out soon. The Sky Priest continued. Large, powerful tribes have watched us but were frightened by the Holy Land. They will now move to attack. For us 5 tribes, this is catastrophic. If we can't hold them off, we'll be wiped out. You 2 are our most powerful vassals. In this crisis, we need your assistance. The Crow Scout tribe will provide liberal compensation. With that, the 2 of them clasped hands and bowed to Meng Hao and the man-form Outlander beast. Meng Hao said nothing. He transformed into a beam of light and followed the Crow Scout tribe members back. Reaching the rear mountain district, he entered his courtyard. He slapped his bag of the cosmos, causing Big Harry and his neo-demon horde to fly out. He looked down into the bag at the collection of neo-demons inside. There were black crows, fierce mosquitoes, the crimson crocodile, the enormous lizard, and other neo-demons from the Crow Divinity Holy Land. Meng Hao's expression remained unchanged as he examined them. If I absorb all these neo-demons, my status as a Grand Dragoneer in the Western Desert will be much more valid. He slapped the bag, causing a black crow to fly out. Eyes glittering, he pointed his finger. Immediately, the demonic chi in the area congealed onto his finger, transforming into pressure that weighed down onto the black crow. Time passed. Meng Hao sent some of his neo-demon horde outside to prevent interference with his seclusion. A month passed. During that month, everyone in the 5 tribes was on edge. Previous strife between the tribes vanished. The great fathers and priests had frequent talks behind closed doors. In the end, they formed an alliance. At the same time, the vassals realized that the Holy Land's collapse meant trouble. Gradually, they left. As mere vassals, not true tribe members, they had no reason to face imminent disaster. In less than half a month, more than half had gone. Yet the 5 tribes' alliance had restored some former grandeur. Though many vassals left, the tribes retained powerful experts and their overall power increased. The 5 tribes' leadership, including the Crow Scout Greatfather, now focused on Meng Hao. As a Grand Dragoneer, Meng Hao had already astonished them. Though individually not very strong, a Grand Dragoneer's battle power was crucial. Though Meng Hao was injured and lacked many neo-demons, it didn't matter. The tribes could vastly increase his horde to secure victory. The entire region behind the mountain now belonged to Meng Hao. Tribe members were prohibited from entering. It was a restricted area, even for the Crow Scout tribe and its allies. Meng Hao didn't need to request this. The 5 tribes willingly offered it. Gu La especially respected Meng Hao. He had moved to the Crow Scout tribe and now sat cross-legged outside Meng Hao's district, standing guard. The wild giant was there too, occasionally letting out roars that shook heaven and earth. The big man who was actually the parrot stayed at first, then ventured out, returning only occasionally. Eventually, the wild giant, restless in one place, joined Big Harry when they went out into the mountains. Another half-month passed, and Meng Hao was still in seclusion. It was at this point that a long beam of light flew through the air in the sky outside of the mountain range occupied by the 5 tribe alliance. Within the beam were 32 gigantic spiders, each hundreds of meters long and fiercely featured. They were brightly colored, obviously extremely poisonous. Though they seemed to fly, an enormous web filled the sky wherever they moved. The web glowed with a mysterious light that made it stand out in contrast to the blue skies and white clouds. Seated cross-legged atop the 32 gigantic spiders was a group of people wearing identical robes, whose bodies were festooned with totem tattoos. Behind the 32 spiders was a massive round, stony meteorite. A hole had been excavated in the middle of the gigantic rock, revealing an interior of crystal that looked like agate. It glowed with a violet light and even seemed to have liquid circulating about inside. A middle-aged man in a long white robe slouched within it, surrounded by coquettish women massaging his shoulders. His features were handsome, but a large black mark on his face changed his appearance completely. Lines of silk attached the gigantic meteorite to the 32 spiders, who were pulling it through the air. Behind them all, the sky was darkened with a vast quantity of spider neo-demons. A young man stood on one of the giant spiders up ahead. Looking back at the agate meteorite, he clasped hands and bowed. In a loud voice, he said, "Your Excellency Dragoneer, up ahead are the ruins of the Crow divinity, occupied by the 5 lesser tribes." "The old fogies back in the tribe are being too cautious," said the man languidly, his expression proud and aloof. "These trifling 5 tribes only managed to gasp their way until now because of the protection of the Crow divinity. The priests figured out that the Crow divinity is gone now, so what's the point in mobilizing such a big force to destroy them? And how come I got sent to probe them out? Whatever. Since I'm here, I'll handle things like I usually do. Before they die, I'll offer them a little bit of hope and then crush it. My demon spiders love to eat the flesh of depressed humans. Spider apprentice, bring forth the Crimson War Declaration." It seemed that to this white-robed man, considering his identity, being dispatched to this place was somewhat of a humiliation. The man's voice echoed out to the Western Desert cultivators who sat on top of the 32 giant spiders. When they heard the Crimson War Declaration mentioned, their vicious faces filled with the thirst for blood. They licked their lips. The eyes of the youth who had spoken moments before turned red, and his lips twisted into a vicious smile. The Crimson War Declaration had only one purpose. It meant that the entire tribe, including tribe members and vassals, would have 3 chances to fight. If they were defeated 3 times in a row, the result was a slaughter and the complete destruction of the entire tribe. This chapter was sponsored by Edias Boglio, Sid Ahmed, Chris Lee, Peter Johansson, Danny Zhu, and LB.